Hey, I'm Mr. Ghost. If you love true horror stories, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. The stories you'll hear are shared by our audience from Reddit, and to keep their original essence, I read them exactly as they were written. Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Also, check the timestamps in the comments for story titles and easy navigation. Now, let's dive into the darkness. I stayed in a hotel that was totally abandoned. Now I know why. A phone call came in with the sun and found me sleeping in a shitty hotel bed somewhere deep in the buttholes of southern New Jersey. My head hurt like hell. My stomach was about 3 seconds from turning, and I just wanted to get some rest. But motherfucking Todd couldn't help himself. The dude was like a corporate wind-up doll, born and bred in the basements of corporate America to wake up at the crack of dawn and take everybody's money. It rained last night, right, Mike? He coughed through a mouthful of menthol lozenges. I heard water on the roof, and the wind. Jeez. The entire building shook like the devil himself was playing maracas. My memory took a few seconds to catch up with the conversation. We'd been driving all day, through the turnpikes and over endless skyline bridges that hovered high above the factories of the Northeast. We didn't arrive at the dingy little inn until sometime around 9 that night. The lights were all off. The lot was dark. It was drizzling then. At least I thought as much. Anyway, I went out for a cup of coffee this morning. The ground was bone dry. I hadn't figured out why. An old alarm clock buzzed next to a row of empty bottles. The television blared white static. I wasn't really listening. I couldn't even find my pants. The room bore all of the typical signs of my personal downfall. A large, empty bag of potato chips was stationed by the refrigerator, with a case of Blue Moon carefully placed beside it. The mattress was soaked with sweat and the sheets were twisted about. It looked like somebody either had an exorcism or got drunk watching reruns of family comedies. Given my history, I settled on the latter. That's not even the weirdest part, Todd whispered. Nobody's here. I checked the halls, the lobby, bathrooms. The entire building is empty. It's freaky. I took the comment with a grain of salt. Todd had a tendency to worry. That was actually putting it mildly. The man was a full-blown panicker. His fear of flying was the sole reason we were forced to drive 500 miles across the fucking country, shilling shitty software to worse people who didn't care all along the way. His anxieties weren't even the worst part. It was the colossal arrogance that drove me up a wall more than anything else. He was one of those guys that seemed to take sadistic pleasure in competition with the GPS. Every wrong turn was a victory in the battle of Todd versus the technology. That was how we ended up so far off the beaten path. Some people just don't want their tribal knowledge to be lost. I bet he could have stuck that quote in his corny little PowerPoint. Are you ready yet? He asked. Let's go. I don't like this place very much. Something about it gives me butterflies, and not the fun ones. As much as I hated to admit it, he wasn't totally wrong. We booked the rooms through one of those shady discount travel sites, about an hour ahead of showing up there in the first place. The building seemed modern enough, the parking lot was well lit, and the lobby was decorated with hung plasma TVs and new furniture. But when we made it to the front desk to check in, there wasn't a single person around to greet us. No clerks, no guests, nothing. Just a single sign-in sheet, a stack of faded brochures, and a rack full of keys labeled in neat faded handwriting. We grabbed 2 at random. Todd shuffled toward his room, and I found the minibar in mine. After that, things got hazy. Seriously, he snapped impatiently. Let's go. They'll meet you in the lobby in 5 minutes. I gave it a second before I got out of bed. The nausea eased with a gulp from a plastic water bottle stashed under my pillow. The shower didn't run, and neither did the sink, so that same bottle came in handy when I needed to brush my teeth. I finished getting ready and hated on myself in the mirror a little bit. I wasn't the type to drink myself stupid. It was just a transition period. Nothing was bad. Nothing was good. I was just in a rut. At least that was the excuse. We met by the checkout desk. Nothing had changed. The lobby was quiet and untouched. Chairs were still pithily angled around fake plants, and the same stack of brochures sat patiently collecting dust on the counter. I looked around for a bathroom that actually worked, but before I could find it, pretentious sneakers squeaked down the hallway behind me. "Welcome to scenic White Valley," Todd announced in his best radio voice. home of absolutely nobody. He looked way too pleased with himself for a Monday morning. His checkered polo was buttoned all the way to his chubby little neckbeard, and he wasn't wearing a tie or blazer, so it was a rare day off from the prototypical uniform. He struck me as the type of guy to read Business Insider's column on how to blend in with your people on the road. I guess the previous day's cufflinks just went cutting it. You could almost smell the effort in the form of Draco Noir. "Are you driving?" he sniffed. "I'm ready to take a nap." I looked around for a restroom first. The public one was on the far side of the atrium, past a row of planters and artwork in the form of abstract shapes and buzzwords. I left my bags with the human robot and made my way across the room. The floor was freshly polished, and each step clapped back off the walls with a sharp echo. Inside the bathroom was a single toilet. The tissue dispenser was empty, but the sink still worked. There wasn't a signal on my phone, and the news was a day old. None of my calls or texts were going through. That didn't seem out of the ordinary, though. There hadn't been service for miles. I finished cleaning up and stepped back out into the atrium. Something was off. Everything looked the same. The same tall windows, the same red paint and manicured furniture, but a detail had shifted. Maybe something in the air. I couldn't quite tell what, like the whole room had been rearranged when I wasn't looking. I turned a corner. Then I saw her. A woman stood beside Todd. She was older looking with grey streaked white hair that hung past her shoulders, and eyebrows so thick they formed a single line across her brow. Her uniform didn't match. I don't know why I noticed that first, but I did. The shirt had one logo and the hat had another. Her pants were too tight, and rolls of stretch mark-ridden skin leaned out the side of the gap in between her shirt. She didn't say anything initially, and that was the creepiest part of it all. She just sort of stared at me, like she expected something to happen. Todd kept just as still. He shot me a quick look before his eyes dropped to the floor. "Mike," he whispered when he talked. I realized then that I had never heard him be quiet about anything. "I think we better do what this woman asks." I pulled the key out of my pocket and set it on the desk. "All right. Does she want us to check out?" No sooner than the words exited my mouth, a sharp screech ripped across the atrium, loud enough to force us to our knees. The tone shifted up and down in frequency. It was piercing one second, then rough the next. I couldn't figure out where it came from until something dropped behind the front desk. My attention shifted to the chalkboard. That's when I noticed the knife. "Go," the woman grunted. "Now." She dragged the blade across the board a second time. It was horrible. Todd screamed, but I couldn't hear his words. I could only see his lips move. We got back up to our feet. Then she pointed at the front door. "Go," she repeated. Now, we got up and walked. The stranger followed. I didn't look back at her. I didn't have to. I could feel her breath hot on my shoulders. Her steps fell into an uneven echo, like her shoes didn't fit, or she hadn't moved in a while. I glanced over at Todd, and his normally polished eggshell had already begun to crack. Sweat gathered on his collar and soaked through the pits of his polo. His expression looked like the features on his face had frozen somewhere between apology and panic mode. "Please," he whispered. "I don't know what we've done to offend you. Just let us leave." The knife poked gently into my back. "Go." We kept it moving. The double doors led to a courtyard in front of the building. Outside, the garden was decorated with flowers and benches. The smell of fresh mulch felt like freedom. I could see our car in the lot. There was nobody else parked there. I hoped this mystery woman, fucked as she was, would simply let us get in and drive away. Maybe she thought we were trespassing, or whatever, but at least then we could put this whole knife-point encounter behind us. We marched in an awkward sort of procession, and after the first 100 steps, I was sure that we were home free. But just as Todd reached into his pocket to find his keys, the blade slashed across my peripheral vision. Fuzzy white dice fell to the ground. Bright red blood followed. "Go." We walked on. Todd limped beside me. He was quiet now. We left the parking lot behind after a few hundred feet. The manicured landscaping transitioned into a dirt path between dense trees. The forest was quiet. Branches crisscrossed overhead, low enough that we had to duck in places. The woman stayed behind us. A hill rose out of the woods with the early morning fog right above it. We reached the crest. That was when the valley opened up in earnest. "This can't be real," Todd mumbled out in front. Does nobody work in this town? A clearing about a mile wide spanned a gap in between the trees. Every inch of it was covered with people. There were parents with kids and folks in uniforms. There were wheelchair-bound patients in hospital gowns and beds with monitors and nurses attached. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, but not one of them said a thing. It was disturbing. They were the quietest group of people I had ever seen. Nobody coughed, nobody whispered, nobody laughed. They didn't even seem to look at each other. The only sounds were the steady movement of their feet on the dirt and the soft rustle of clothing that brushed together. A weather-beaten brown building sat at the center of the clearing. It couldn't have been taller than a couple of floors, no wider than about 100 yards. There weren't any roads that led to it, no walkways either. It looked like somebody had just taken the place and plopped it in the center of the valley. The structure itself was in rough shape. Vines crawled across the face of the faded red brick. Weeds gathered around the foundation. The roof sagged in the middle. A drain pipe dangled from the side, and the windows were stained to the point where we couldn't see through, even in the daylight. A sign over the awning read library in chipped white lettering. The woman pointed ahead, and we hustled down the hill to join the crowd. The group was packed tighter towards the front. The people seemed exhausted or angry, even, like the journey had taken everything out of them. Todd tiptoed beside a burly man in pajamas. I fell into line behind a mother and her 2 young children. I tried to get them to look at me. The kids, the adults, anybody. I wanted to scream, but I could still feel the knife against my back, and every wrong move felt like it could cut my kidney right out of the fat. My daughter expects me to be home tonight, Todd spoke plainly through the throngs of bodies. She won't understand why I'm gone. Nobody answered him. The townsfolk were restless by this point, arms and shoulders pressed up against my back. One lady nearly nicked her hand on the knife. A row of heavy boulders had been laid out to form a path through the field. The formation funneled the people into a tight wedge near the door, but they weren't moving. It was like they were stuck. The big man in pajamas shoved a gurney aside and forced his way to the front. He slammed on the oak exterior with his fist 3 times in rhythm. The double door swung open, and then the crowd started to move. The whole line broke apart. Parents ditched their families. Nurses abandoned their patients. The push from the back didn't stop. A few people fell down next to the rocks. One of them was an older man with white hair and a gold t-shirt ripped at the seams. He vanished beneath the weight of rushed footsteps and appeared again, face down in the dirt. "What are they doing?" I shouted over the chaos to the stranger behind us. "What the hell is this?" She glanced at me and smiled like it was obvious. "They're hungry." The crowd rushed into the building like salmon headed upstream to spawn. Dust kicked up behind them. Floorboards creaked under the weight. The stampede was over in about 10 seconds, and then it was quiet. A handful of people hadn't made it inside. Some were moving, some, like the old man, were not. I'll never forget the look of determination on a teenager with mangled legs and a row of bloodied cuts in his face. He dragged himself toward the door, inch by inch, until a last-minute straggler shoved him back down. His skull hit a rock with a sickening crack. He didn't move after that. "Go," the woman gestured. "Inside." We did what she told us. The inside of the library looked like it had been furnished by someone with a very small budget and a fond memory of the year 1997. The walls were pale green and covered in laminated newspaper clippings about science fairs and fundraisers. The chairs were upholstered in faded fabric and arranged around metal tables stacked with old magazines. An empty fish tank sat on a low shelf, but there wasn't any water, just a plastic log and a thin layer of gravel. "What the heck are we doing here?" Todd spat. "We have a right to know." The stranger tilted her knife towards a staircase tucked into the back corner of the room. She seemed more agitated than before, almost antsy. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she kept scratching her neck until the skin turned red. Her fingernails were peeled and bloodied. There was a look on her face like a crackhead hungry for a fix. "Gal." The air got hotter as we climbed. The steps rose above a long and narrow hallway, where the mob had already vanished from view. At the top was a plain gray door with the word storage labeled at the top. Our captor fiddled with the lock for a second. Then she poked the broad side of the blade into Todd's back. Inside, the room was small and slanted at the edges, almost like a makeshift attic office. A closet took up the far corner. 2 narrow windows let in bright sunlight that illuminated a thin strip like tape across the wood paneling. The air smelled of old carpet and moldy paper, combined with something sharp and chemical. "Stay here," the woman shouted. "No leave." And with that, the door slammed shut. A lock clicked behind it. Todd paced around the narrow space in tight circles. His breathing got heavy. He swallowed hard and pressed a hand to his chest. He looked like he was about to pass out. For a second I thought I was going to have to catch him. "We need a way out," he babbled. "Mike, we can't stay up here. You understand that, right?" I didn't say anything back. There had to be something useful in the room. Something we could use to defend ourselves or help us escape. I tried the windows and they were rusted shut. I pressed my palm into the glass and shoved. Nothing moved. What are we going to do? The closet was next. A cardboard box sat near the back with a faded Home Depot logo stamped on the side. I pulled it out and crouched to check the contents. Inside was a toolbox that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. A broken level sat beside a pair of pliers, with the grip half melted. An old, rusted hammer rested on top. This will work. I went back to the closet to take another look. A gap in the floorboards had opened where the toolbox had been. Pale light bled through the cracks. The smell coming off it was stronger than before, and it was thick with chemicals. Something like bleach or melted plastic. It stung a little when I breathed it in. "Do you hear that?" At first I thought it was the pipes, but the sound didn't match anything I'd heard before. It was a rhythmic clicking, in steady, gurgling intervals, almost like wet lips trying to keep time over a beat. I dropped down to the ground and pressed my eye to the gap in the floorboards. That's when the room beneath us opened up, and I knew we stepped into something we weren't meant to see. "What is it?" Todd snapped. "What's happening?" The main hall was massive, but everybody was gathered around the center. A row of pushed-together desks guarded 3 thick steel drums. A small group of young women in white moved between them in slow, deliberate circles. Each of them dragged long-handled ladles through the surface, through pools of translucent orange liquid. The whole crowd watched them work in silence, while the concoction bubbled like lava and melted cheese. "Not sure," I muttered. "Looks like they're lined up for something." A figure stepped into view from the furthest queue. I recognized the face. He was the same kid from earlier, the one who cracked his skull on the pavement. Something about the way he moved just seemed wrong. The bones in his legs bent at awkward angles. Each step was like watching a puppet try to figure out its strings. His face was pale and streaked with dried blood, but he didn't seem to mind the cuts and bruises. He just kept going, arms at his side, eyes ahead. "This is weird," I muttered out loud. "Now they're getting ready to eat." The teenager shuffled in front of the vats. He seemed to be the first of the townsfolk to be seen by the lunch ladies from hell. They swarmed him in a group. One of them looked him up and down. Another sniffed him by the collarbone, apparently satisfied with the result. The 2 of them scurried out of the way, while a third forced the kid down to his knees in front of the bile. She lifted a utensil to his nose. She pinched his nostrils. She waited. After a moment, a pale white slug forced itself free. "Oh my God," I covered my mouth to keep from vomiting. "This is sick." The woman caught the thing in her dish before she walked toward a smaller drum at the back of the room. She lowered it inside carefully, like it was made of glass. The kid went limp. One of the others stepped in behind him and gently dunked his head into the orange slop. He screamed when the second slug emerged from the slime. Then he sobbed as it crawled across his mouth and up his nose. "They're parasites." I muddled my words trying to explain. "They're inside of them." The kid twitched. His eyes rolled back. For a second, I thought he was about to collapse again. Then his whole body seized. He snapped upright and started laughing. It was a hysterical, panicked, frenzied sort of laughter, the type where you have to catch your breath in between. He bolted across the room and slammed his head into a wall. Then he bounced off and did it again and again. He dropped to his knees and stared at the blood on his hands. Then he licked them, slowly, as if he was savoring the taste. Todd reached around me and pulled the hammer off the toolbox. I couldn't stop him. Everything happened too fast. There wasn't any time to react. He stepped past me and smacked the window with one clean smash. The glass cracked and blew apart. Shards bounced across the floor. I was still looking through the crack in the floorboards when the energy shifted. Every head in the hole below snapped toward me. Not toward the window. Not the noise. Me. Like they knew exactly where I was. Like they'd just been waiting for a reason. and then they started to run. The teenager was the fastest. He pushed the others out of the way as he dropped to all fours and sprinted to the door at the end of the long hallway. I got up and started to move myself. Todd was trying to force himself out of the window, but he didn't quite fit. His pants were torn where the jagged pieces bit deep into his legs. His shirt was covered in red. He twisted hard, trying to shove through, but the frame scraped him raw. He yelled back at me as footsteps rushed up the steps. Then he turned around. There was something evil in his eyes when he hit me. I slammed into the floor hard. My head bounced against the tile, and everything got slow. My ears rang. My vision pulsed at the edges. I could still hear him moving somewhere above me. Todd. He was angry about something. The door burst open. The mob poured in. The man in pajamas spotted him first. Todd had one foot out the window, but the cuff of his khakis was caught on the radiator. He couldn't move. The big guy yanked him by the ankle and pulled him back inside. The rest of them screamed like animals. They clawed at his arms and dragged him across the floor. Todd kicked. He begged. He said he was sorry. He said he didn't mean to. They didn't care. They hauled him out the door and back down the stairs, still yelling, still pleading for me to come and save him. And then it was quiet again. I waited by the door for a few seconds, just long enough to know they weren't coming back. The screams didn't stop. They only got worse. Todd's voice had turned hoarse and jagged, like he swallowed some sandpaper. There weren't any words to be heard anymore, just guttural moans. The mob loved it. They made these horrible little noises. Snorts, gasps, something that almost sounded like applause. They were excited now, and that horrific fucking clicking sound didn't stop either. It only got louder. I stepped through the doorway and into the hall. My legs wobbled, my skull throbbed, the world tilted every few steps. But I didn't stop. I just walked, down the steps, through the library, and out the front door. For a moment I felt guilty. I really did. But then I thought about the hammer, and those stupid fucking khakis, and all of the horribly condescending moments that led to the one when that cowardly, selfish little asshole tried to sacrifice me so that he could survive. And then I just kept moving. The woods were cold and dark. Then, the early morning had given way to a gentle rain that slipped through the trees and clung to the branches. Mud sucked at my shoes. Branches scratched at my shoulders. I followed the same path we took in and ended up in the field that led to the parking lot. Our car was still parked at the back. I spotted the keys with the little white dice in the gravel where we left them, wet and smeared with blood. I picked them up, unlocked the door, and slid into the driver's seat. I stared through the windshield for a while. Then I started the engine and drove away. That night, I reported everything to the police in my hometown. I felt safer there. I expected they'd ask me more questions, maybe even think I had something to do with it. Maybe I did. I still couldn't shake the guilt of leaving my co-worker behind. Before long, the secretary returned and told me they had located Todd. They spoke to him on the phone, and he was a little shaken up, but alive and well. I couldn't believe it. 2 days later, a postcard arrived in the mail. Greetings from scenic White Valley. Signed, Todd. The hollow echo. Marcus Webb couldn't remember when the headache started. They crept in like unwelcome house guests, set on behind his eyes during the quietest moments of his days. At first, he blamed the dust in his antiquarian bookshop. Centuries of paper and leather binding had a way of making the air feel thick, especially during Maine's humid summers. But as autumn winds swept through the coastal town of Port Haven, the pain remained. 3 years since Catherine's passing, and the bookshop felt emptier than ever. Customers wandered in occasionally, but most days Marcus sat alone at his desk, cataloging acquisitions or restoring damaged spines. The townspeople had stopped asking if he was all right. Their concerned glances had faded to polite nods. Life moved on, except for Marcus. That night in October, as rain pelted the shop's bay windows, Marcus found himself staring at the margins of his inventory ledger. Sketches covered the page, swirling patterns he didn't remember drawing. Circles within circles, spiraling inward, with tiny symbols filling the spaces between. His pen hovered above the paper, black ink pooling at its tip. The clock on the wall read 2:17. Marcus closed the ledger and rubbed his eyes. Time to go upstairs to his apartment above the shop. But as he reached for the desk lamp, something caught his attention. A sound, barely perceptible beneath the rain, like static between radio stations or distant voices arguing underwater. "Hello?" he called, though he knew the shop was empty. The sound faded. Marcus shook his head. Just tired. Too many late nights surrounded by old books and older memories. He dreamed of the ocean at night. Not the familiar coastline visible from his bedroom window, but something vaster and darker. In the dream, he stood on black sand while waves pulled back to reveal glistening shapes beneath the water. The shapes moved against the tide, inching toward shore. Marcus tried to run, but found himself walking toward them instead, water rising past his ankles, his knees. He woke drenched in sweat despite the autumn chill. The headaches worsened over the next week. Pills didn't help. Neither did the herbal tea Mrs. Finch from the cafe suggested. What helped, oddly enough, was returning to the desk after closing hours and listening to the strange static that now emerged nightly. Sometimes he sat there until dawn, head tilted, straining to make sense of the whispers. By the third week, the whispers had become words. Marcus, keeper, finder. The first time he heard his name clearly, he overturned his chair, scrambling away from the desk. But the following night, he returned. And the night after that, something about the voices calmed his headaches, replacing pain with purpose. He began finding himself in strange places. Once, standing at the edge of the town pier at midnight, waves lapping at the wooden posts below. Another time, in the basement of his shop, facing a wall of old newspapers he couldn't remember organizing. The locals noticed Port Haven wasn't big enough for peculiar behavior to go unremarked. "Everything okay, Mr. Webber?" asked Tommy, the mail carrier. "Saw you walking Main Street at 3 a.m. Tuesday? Car trouble?" Marcus nodded and mumbled something about insomnia, but he had no memory of Tuesday night. The whispers grew more insistent. "The lighthouse." "North Point." Wait. He found himself researching North Point Lighthouse during business hours, neglecting customers. The structure had been abandoned since the 1960s, replaced by an automated beacon further along the coast. Local teenagers occasionally ventured there on dares, but most people avoided it after dark. Something about the place felt wrong, they said. Marcus knew he needed to go there. Not wanted, needed. Bring light to darkness. Releaser, keeper of the key. The morning he decided to visit the lighthouse, his reflection gave him pause. Dark circles beneath his eyes made them appear sunken into his skull. His clothes hung loosely. How much weight had he lost? When had he last eaten a proper meal? Yet despite his haggard appearance, Marcus felt more alive than he had in years. The fog of grief that had enveloped him since Catherine's death seemed to be lifting, replaced by something else, something with purpose. He closed the shop early, leaving a handwritten sign, "Family emergency." The locals would gossip. Marcus had no family left, but he didn't care. The voices had become constant now, a murmuring stream of encouragement as he loaded a flashlight, bottled water, and sandwich into his backpack. North Point Lighthouse stood on a rocky outcropping 4 miles up the coast. In better days, Marcus might have hiked there, but now he drove his aging station wagon as close as the dirt access road allowed, then walked the remaining half-mile along the cliffside path. Wind whipped his thinning hair as gulls circled overhead. The lighthouse rose from the rocks like a sentinel, its white paint peeling to reveal gray stone underneath. Nothing special about it, just an abandoned tower with a small keeper's cottage attached at the base. Yet when Marcus approached, the whispers grew louder, drowning out the waves crashing below. Here, home, book of names. The cottage door hung partially open, swinging gently in the wind. Inside, debris littered the floor, beer cans, cigarette butts, the detritus of teenage adventurers. But the whispers drew Marcus past the graffiti-covered walls to the center of the main room, where rotting floorboards formed a rough circle. "Hello." Without hesitation, Marcus knelt and began prying up the boards. His fingers bled as splinters dug into his skin, but he barely noticed. Something waited beneath, something meant for him. The voices assured him of this. When his fingers touched metal, the whispers crescendoed to a roar. A small iron box, no larger than a bread loaf, sat nestled in the dirt beneath the floor, green with corrosion, its surface etched with those same circular patterns he'd been drawing in his ledger. Open, released, begin, breath catching in his throat. Marcus lifted the box. Heavier than it looked, and warm to the touch, despite the cottage's chill. The rusted latch resisted, then gave way with a sound like teeth grinding together. Inside lay a book. Its cover appeared cured from some kind of leather, darker at the edges, with a texture that reminded Marcus of his own skin. No title adorned the spine, but small bumps and ridges formed patterns across its surface, marks that might be whorls or might be faces, depending on how the light hit them. The Necronomicon, Marcus whispered, though he had no idea how he knew the name. As his fingers brushed the cover, the world fell away. Marcus' consciousness tore free from his body, launching across vast emptiness. Stars streaked past like rain on a car windshield. Galaxies swirled beneath him. He screamed, but no sound emerged in the vacuum between worlds. Then he saw them. Beings of impossible size battled across the void. On one side, entities of light so bright they should have burned his mind to cinders. On the other, writhing shadows darker than the space between stars. Neither side resembled anything human or animal. They existed as concepts given form, as ideas with claws and teeth. The old gods and the parasite gods. Marcus understood without being told. He watched as they tore at each other, rending reality itself with their conflict. Where the light beings fell, their essence crystallized into stars. Where the shadow beings bled, galaxies formed from their ether. The universe as he knew it was merely fallout from this war, a battlefield gone quiet but never abandoned. The vision shifted, pulling Marcus toward the shadow beings. He saw their true nature, entities that fed on worship and fear, that consumed consciousness itself. They existed by hollowing out other life forms, wearing them like suits, spreading across worlds like a disease. And now, after eons of dormancy, they hungered again. The knowledge split Marcus' mind, like an axe, through kindling. No human was meant to comprehend such vastness, such hunger. As his consciousness began to fragment, tendrils of darkness reached toward him, not to destroy, but to preserve. They wrapped around his thoughts, sealing away the most terrible truths, bandaging his fracturing psyche. Not yet. Need you hope. For now. The darkness took him completely. Marcus woke on the cottage floor, the book clutched to his chest. Light through the broken windows told him days had passed. His clothes hung looser still, his body reduced to skin stretched over bone. He should have been dead from dehydration, yet he felt stronger than ever. The voices no longer came from outside. They lived within him now, guiding his hands as he opened the book. Pages filled with script he shouldn't have recognized but somehow did. Words that shifted when viewed directly, settling only in peripheral vision. Marcus began to read, and the world around him changed. The cottage walls seemed to breathe. Shadows deepened in corners where no darkness should have reached. Outside, gulls fell silent, and the constant crash of waves became a rhythmic pulse like a vast heart beating. He read until night fell, until his eyes burned and his throat cracked from thirst. Only then did he close the book, tuck it carefully into his backpack, and stumble back toward his car. Port Haven looked different as he drove through town. Beneath the familiar storefronts and houses, Marcus saw patterns he'd never noticed before. Alignments of buildings that formed symbols when viewed from certain angles. Even the people walking along Main Street seemed changed, their movements mechanical, their faces masks covering something else. Had it always been this way, or had the book opened his eyes? Back in his shop, Marcus locked the doors and pulled the blinds. He needed time to process what he'd found, what he'd seen. But the book called to him, its presence in his backpack like a physical weight pulling him downward. When he finally removed it, laying it reverently on his desk, the sense of relief was palpable. Just a few more pages, he told himself. Just a few more before sleep. 3 days later, a pounding on the shop door finally broke his trance. Marcus Webb. You in there? Sheriff Dawson's voice, concerned but authoritative. Marcus looked up from the book, disoriented. How long had he been reading? Empty water bottles and granola bar wrappers littered the desk around him. His beard had grown patchy across his hollow cheeks, but the headaches were gone, replaced by clarity unlike anything he'd ever known. Just a minute, he called, surprised by the rasp in his voice. He quickly wrapped the book in a cloth and placed it in a drawer before unlocking the door. Sheriff Dawson's weathered face registered shock as he took in Marcus' appearance. Jesus, Marcus, you look like hell. Folks were worried when they didn't see any movement in here for days. Thought you might have. He trailed off, gesturing vaguely. I'm fine, Marcus assured him. aware that he looked anything but. Just working on a special acquisition. Lost track of time. Must be some book, Dawson said, peering past him into the dimly lit shop. He cannot see, not read. The voice in Marcus' head no longer surprised him. It had become a constant companion, guiding him through the text, explaining concepts that would have otherwise driven him mad. Only occasionally did fragments of his vision at the lighthouse break through, glimpses of the true nature of the entities that spoke to him. When that happened, the voice would quickly soothe him, directing his attention elsewhere. Just getting over a bug, Marcus said, offering a smile that felt stiff on his face. He'll open up tomorrow, good as new. Sheriff Dawson didn't look convinced but nodded anyway. Get some rest, Marcus. And maybe a meal or two. You're starting to look like one of those books of yours, all leather and dust. After Dawson left, Marcus stumbled to the bathroom and stared at his reflection. The sheriff was right. He barely recognized himself. His eyes had always been blue, but now they seemed deeper somehow, as if the pupils had expanded to consume most of the iris. Dark veins tracked across his temples where none had been before. When he smiled experimentally, his teeth looked sharper. Change come. Vessel prepares. You become. That night, Marcus dreamed again of the ocean, but this time he was beneath the waves, drifting downward toward shapes that moved in the abyss. Great cities of twisted architecture spread across the seafloor, inhabited by beings that moved in ways nothing should move. In the center of the largest city, a massive form lay curled in slumber, its size defying comprehension. As Marcus floated closer, one enormous eye opened, regarding him with ancient hunger. He woke screaming, but the scream turned to laughter. Not his laughter, something using his voice. Time to begin. Gather the flock, prepare the way. Marcus understood what he needed to do. The book had shown him how to recognize those who would hear the call. People with voids inside them, emptiness that could be filled. People like him. The next morning, he opened the shop as promised. But while customers browsed the main floor, Marcus began renovating the back room, creating a space for what would come next. He installed heavy curtains, replaced the harsh overhead light with softer lamps, and positioned chairs in a circle around a central podium. A temple for truth, a nest for new birth. Begin. His first recruit came to him a week later. Eleanor Perkins, a widow whose husband's fishing boat had gone down 3 years ago. She wandered into the shop on a Tuesday afternoon, browsing aimlessly until closing time. Most customers Marcus gently ushered out at 5, but something about Mrs. Perkins made him hesitate. The hollowness behind her eyes, perhaps. The way she touched each book as if searching for something beyond its cover. "We're closing," he said softly, "but you're welcome to join me for tea in the back room. I've just acquired some interesting volumes on local history." Eleanor looked up, surprised by the invitation but unable to refuse. "That would be lovely, Mr. Webb. I haven't had much company lately. She hungers. She carries empty spaces." Perfect vessel. Marcus prepared Earl Grey in his small kitchenette, while Eleanor settled into one of the armchairs in the newly renovated back room. When he returned with the tea tray, he found her staring at the central podium with an odd expression. "This reminds me of something," she murmured. "A dream, perhaps." "We all dream, Mrs. Perkins," Marcus said, setting down the tray. "Some dreams are more significant than others." As they sipped their tea, Marcus spoke of Port Haven's history, shipwrecks, ghost stories, tales of strange lights seen over the water on moonless nights. Eleanor listened, nodding occasionally. When Marcus casually mentioned the North Point lighthouse, her hand trembled, spilling tea onto her lap.
"I'm so sorry," she gasped, dabbing at the stain.
"No harm done," Marcus assured her. "The lighthouse affects many people that way. It has a certain presence. James, my husband, he used to fish near there, said it made him uneasy. The night before his last voyage, he dreamed of it. Said he saw something moving inside the light itself." Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. "I never told anyone that before." Marcus leaned forward. "Would you like to see something special, Mrs. Perkins? Something few people have ever seen?" Without waiting for her answer, he retrieved the Necronomicon from its hiding place. When he returned, Eleanor's eyes fixed on the book with an intensity that hadn't been there before. Marcus placed it on the podium and opened to a specific page, one filled with intricate drawings of the ocean floor. "Does this look familiar?" he asked. Eleanor rose from her chair as if pulled by invisible strings. She approached the podium, trembling fingers hovering over the page. These are the places James described. The cities beneath the waves. How did you? The book finds those who need it, Marcus explained. Just as you found your way here today. He guided her hand to touch the page. When her fingers made contact, Eleanor gasped. Her pupils dilated until her eyes appeared entirely black. For a moment, Marcus caught a glimpse of what the book showed her. The same vision he'd experienced, but filtered, controlled, enough to bind her to the cause without shattering her mind. "Oh," she breathed when the moment passed. "Oh, Mr. Webb, I've been so alone, so empty." "Not anymore," Marcus promised. "And please call me Marcus. We're family now." By month's end, Marcus had 3 regulars attending his literary discussions. Eleanor Perkins brought a steady hand and quiet devotion. Professor Alan Bartlett, recently forced into early retirement from Port Haven Community College after a scandal involving a student, contributed academic rigor and an endless thirst to understand the book's origins. Lily Winters, a troubled artist whose paintings had grown increasingly disturbing over the past year, offered vision and creativity. Each of them touched the Necronomicon. Each received a fragment of Marcus' vision. Each returned night after night, drawn by the whispers that now filled their own heads. The circle grows, flames from embers, prepare for more. Their meetings evolved a routine. They gathered after the shop closed, sitting in the circle of chairs while Marcus read from the Necronomicon. The words themselves held power. Certain combinations of sounds caused candle flames to dance or shadows to deepen in corners. Sometimes as Marcus read, his voice changed, becoming deeper, older. During those moments, his followers sat transfixed, absorbing knowledge that bypassed conscious thought. They learned rituals, seemingly harmless exercises at first, breathing patterns that synchronized their heartbeats, words to be spoken at specific times of day, symbols to be drawn and contemplated. With each session, the group grew closer, developing an uncanny ability to anticipate each other's thoughts. "I dreamed of you all last night," Lily announced during one meeting. "We were standing in a circle at the lighthouse, looking up at the stars. But the stars were looking back." "I had the same dream," Eleanor whispered. "As did I," Professor Bartlett added. "Is this normal, Marcus? This connection between us?" "Very normal," Marcus assured them. "We're becoming attuned to each other, to what awaits us." Only in private did Marcus struggle with doubts. Fragments of his vision occasionally broke through the barriers the parasite gods had erected in his mind. Glimpses of worlds consumed, of civilizations reduced to living hives for the entities he now served. In those moments, cold terror gripped him, a voice deep inside screaming to burn the book, to run, to warn others. But the whispers always soothed him back into compliance. Temporary discomfort, necessary growth. Trust us. The second month brought 7 new members to their circle. Word spread through town about the book club at Webb's Antiquarian Books. Most came out of curiosity but left unchanged. Those who stayed were the ones who heard the whispers, who felt the pull, the ones with spaces inside them waiting to be filled. During group rituals, participants sometimes glimpsed Marcus' true form, a hollow vessel filled with writhing shadows. The first time it happened, a young fisherman named Paul bolted for the door. The others caught him before he reached it. "It's a gift," Eleanor explained, as they held the struggling man. "He's showing us what will become." By the 3rd month, strange events plagued Port Haven. Residents reported unusual dreams, oceans rising, stars going dark, shapes moving beneath the water. Birds formed odd patterns against the dawn sky. Fish washed ashore with troubling regularity, their bodies twisted as if trying to evolve into something else. Symbols appeared throughout town, carved into trees, drawn on sidewalks with chalk that wouldn't wash away in the rain, painted on the sides of buildings overnight. The same circular patterns Marcus had unconsciously sketched in his ledger, now spreading like a virus across Port Haven. Those who joined Marcus' group grew in number. Some came willingly, drawn by the whispers. Others resisted until their dreams became unbearable. A few vanished for days, only to return with altered personalities and no memory of their absence. Those ones moved differently afterward, as if learning to use their own bodies. Sheriff Dawson noticed the changes. He visited the bookshop more frequently, asking casual questions about the evening gatherings. "Just trying to bring some culture to our little town," Marcus explained during one such visit. "People need community, especially during the dark winter months." Strange choice of reading material. Dawson commented, gesturing to a symbol-covered page Marcus had forgotten to hide. Don't recall seeing anything like that in my literature classes. Ancient poetry, Marcus lied smoothly. Mesopotamian, I believe. Professor Bartlett has been translating it for us. He interfered. Remove obstacle. Not yet time. I should stop by sometime, Dawson said. Always enjoyed a good book. We'd be delighted, Marcus replied, though the voices screamed warnings in his head. After the sheriff left, Marcus gathered his inner circle. We need to accelerate our plans. I've located important information in the final chapters of the book. What kind of information? Professor Bartlett asked, his once skeptical academic mind now fully converted to their cause. A ritual. One that requires specific astronomical alignment. The conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, while Pluto resides in Capricorn. It happens once every 238 years. Marcus' voice dropped. And it occurs 3 weeks from now. What does the ritual do? Lily asked, her fingers stained with paints mixed from unusual ingredients, crushed beetles, her own blood, ash from burned pages of the Necronomicon. It opens a doorway, Marcus explained. A pathway for our gods to reach through. Not completely. They're too vast for that. But enough to touch our world again. To bestow their gifts upon the worthy. The lighthouse, Eleanor whispered. That's where it must happen. Marcus nodded. The book says it stands on a thin place. A point where the barrier between worlds has worn thin over millennia. We need to prepare it. The group quickly developed a cover story, a historical preservation project to document the lighthouse before winter storms could damage it further. Professor Bartlett used his academic credentials to secure permits. Lily created convincing sketches of architectural details they claimed to be preserving. Eleanor, whose late husband had been respected in town, lent credibility to the project. Work began immediately. By day they made visible repairs to the exterior, replacing broken windows, repaint weathered surfaces. By night, they prepared the interior, according to the Necronomicon specifications. Symbols carved into door frames, candle wax mixed with strange powders poured into patterns on the floor. Mirrors positioned to reflect moonlight in specific direction. As the conjunction approached, physical changes manifested in the group members. Some developed unusual birthmarks, shapes that resembled the symbols from the book. Others found themselves temporarily speaking languages they'd never learned. Several became highly sensitive to light, preferring to move about town only after sunset. Marcus underwent the most dramatic transformation. The veins beneath his skin darkened until they resembled ink spreading through tissue paper. His eyes, once blue, now appeared black in all but the brightest light. When he spoke during rituals, his followers sometimes saw movement in his throat, as if something else used his voice. Yet to the rest of Port Haven, he maintained his facade, the reclusive bookseller who'd found new purpose in community outreach. Few connected the strange occurrences around town with the growing group that met at Webb's Antiquarian Books. Few, except for one. Diane Harper, town historian and librarian, noticed patterns that others missed. The symbols appearing around town matched rituals in a book about occult practices she'd once catalogued. The timing of nightmares reported by residents coincided with meetings at Marcus' shop. Most troubling, she found similarities between current events and town records from 1774, when a similar group had formed around a charismatic ship captain. That group had ended with a mass drowning, 27 people walking into the sea one winter night, their bodies never recovered. When Diane brought her concerns to Sheriff Dawson, he listened more carefully than she expected. Been watching Webb for a while now, he admitted. Something's not right there. People go in normal and come out different. The lighthouse is key, Diane insisted. According to the records, that's where the 1774 group held their final meeting before the drownings. They've been renovating it for weeks. Historical preservation, they said. There's nothing historical about what they're doing, Diane countered. We need to stop them before history repeats itself. Word of their conversation reached Marcus through Paul, the fisherman who had tried to escape months earlier and now served as the group's eyes and ears in town. The whispers in Marcus' head grew frantic. Danger approaches. Silence the interference. Protect the gateway. Marcus deployed his followers strategically. Eleanor visited Diane, claiming interest in her historical research while planting doubts about her mental stability among other townspeople. Professor Bartlett used his remaining academic connections to question the librarian's research methods. Lily began a series of disturbing paintings depicting Diane and Sheriff Dawson in positions of torment, focusing her newfound abilities on the images. Within days, Diane developed debilitating migraines that left her housebound. Sheriff Dawson found himself plagued by nightmares so vivid he couldn't distinguish them from reality. His deputies noticed his deteriorating condition, but attributed it to overwork. Meanwhile, final preparations continued at the lighthouse. The conjunction would occur at precisely 3:17 a.m. on December 21, the winter solstice. Everything needed to be perfect. The night before the ritual, Marcus stood alone in his shop, staring at his reflection in an antique mirror. What looked back barely resembled the man who had once grieved for his wife Catherine. The thing in the mirror smiled with too many teeth, its eyes pools of absolute darkness. For a moment, Marcus felt the barriers in his mind crack. He remembered what he had glimpsed during his vision, the true nature of the parasite gods. Not saviors or benefactors, but consumers. Entities that hollowed out worlds and wore them like clothing, discarding them when they grew bored. He saw Earth's future, humans transformed into something unrecognizable, their consciousness subsumed into a hive mind that existed only to worship and feed the things from beyond the stars. "Catherine," he whispered, a last fragile connection to his humanity. "What have I done?" Doubt is natural. Transformation requires sacrifice. You are honored among all. The whispers wrapped around his thoughts, soothing the cracks, rebuilding the walls between Marcus and the horrible truth. By morning his resolve had returned, stronger than ever. The day of the ritual arrived with an unnatural stillness. No birds sang. The ocean lay flat as glass. Clouds hung motionless in the sky. Port Haven residents stayed indoors without knowing why. Television sets and radios producing only stat. At sunset, Marcus gathered his followers, now numbering 33, at the bookshop. They moved through town in small groups to avoid attention, converging at the lighthouse as darkness fell. Sheriff Dawson, still struggling with his nightmares, noticed the movement too late to organize any response. By midnight, all preparations were complete. The inner circle, Marcus, Eleanor, Professor Bartlett, and Lily, took their positions around the central chamber of the lighthouse. The others formed concentric rings around them, each person standing on a specific symbol carved into the floor. The Necronomicon lay open on a stone pedestal at the center, its pages turned by themselves, settling on the ritual Marcus had discovered weeks earlier. Outside, clouds parted to reveal a sky crowded with stars that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the group's breathing. At 3:00 a.m., they began to chant, sounds no human throat should produce, a language older than mankind. The lighthouse walls vibrated with each syllable. Glass in the windows cracked, but didn't shatter. The air grew thick, difficult to breathe. As 3:17 a.m. approached, reality began to fray. The boundaries between dimensions thinned. Through the windows they could see the ocean rising in a single massive wave that hovered impossibly at its peak. The stars above aligned, forming the same circular pattern that had haunted Marcus' dreams since the beginning. In the final seconds, Marcus stepped forward to complete the ritual. He raised his hands, now barely recognizable as human, and spoke the words that would open the doorway. As he did, the barriers in his mind shattered completely. He remembered everything. He saw the parasite gods as they truly were, not the beings of darkness he'd glimpsed before, but something far worse. Entities that existed beyond concepts like good or evil, that viewed all life as resources to be consumed. He saw their plan, not to elevate humanity, but to use Earth as a foothold in their renewed war against the old gods. Humans were nothing but disposable weapons in a conflict beyond comprehension. Despite this knowledge, Marcus completed the ritual. His hands moved of their own accord. His voice spoke words his mind recoiled from. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the top of the lighthouse exploded outward, creating an opening to the sky. Through this aperture descended a tendril of darkness, just a fragment of a parasite god, but enough to change everything. The entity hovered in the center of the chamber, a writhing shadow that hurt the eyes to look upon directly. Marcus stepped forward, arms outstretched, believing himself the chosen vessel for this divine presence. "I have prepared the way," he announced, his voice carrying the reverence of a true believer despite the horror screaming in his mind. "I offer myself as your vessel on this world." The shadow paused, seeming to consider him. Then it moved past Marcus toward Lily. who stood transfixed, her eyes reflecting something beyond human comprehension. The entity engulfed her, seeping into her skin like ink into paper. She didn't scream. She smiled as her body twisted, accommodating something it was never designed to contain. When the transformation finished, what stood before them resembled Lily, only in the vaguest sense. Her movements were fluid yet wrong, her smile too wide, her eyes windows to someplace else. "Thank you for your service, Harold," she said to Marcus, her voice layered with countless others. "You have fulfilled your purpose." The inner circle surrounded Lily, bowing in worship. One by one, the other followers filed past her, receiving her touch on their foreheads, a blessing that left a smoking brand in the shape of the circular symbol. Only Marcus remained apart, frozen by the terrible knowledge now fully unlocked in his mind. As dawn approached, the newly possessed Lily led her marked followers from the lighthouse. They moved with perfect coordination, like a single organism with many bodies. Their destination unknown, their purpose clear only to the entity controlling them. Left alone, Marcus sank to the floor beside the Necronomicon. The book lay open to new pages that hadn't existed before. On them he read the true history of the parasite gods, their endless consumption of worlds, their use and disposal of species after species. He saw his own insignificant role in their grand design, not the chosen prophet he'd believed himself to be, but merely a tool used and discarded. He closed the book and stumbled back to his car, driving to his shop on autopilot. The town seemed unchanged in the early morning light, though he noticed subtle differences, shadows that moved against the sun, reflections that didn't match their sources. The first signs of what was coming. In his empty shop, Marcus sat at his desk, the weight of what he'd done crushing him. The Hisva had fallen silent, their purpose fulfilled. But in that silence, he detected something new, a different kind of voice, faint but growing stronger. A sound like crystal bells or light given form. Betrayer, destroyer, hope, the voice of the old gods, awakening in response to their ancient enemies. Return. Marcus opened the Necronomicon one last time and found its final pages transformed yet again. Now they contained different rituals, ways to fight what he had helped unleash, to seal the doorway he had opened. Too late to prevent the coming conflict, but perhaps enough to influence its outcome. As dawn broke over Port Haven, Marcus Webb began to read, tears streaming down his hollow face. The war that had birthed the universe was beginning again, and he had helped ignite its first battle. The best he could hope for now was redemption, not for himself, but for the world he had condemned. Outside, the sun rose blood-red over a too-still ocean, and somewhere in Port Haven, people with marked foreheads began to gather followers of their own. I dredge up trash for a living. We found something we should not have. Let me start off by saying I shouldn't have even come to work that day. It was a pristine Saturday morning, and I was standing on the deck of my uncle's swamp trailer, inhaling the lovely springtime air. The tide was just starting to drift back in, so the water had a pungent odor to it. My uncle makes his living cleaning up trash and debris from local bodies of water, riverbeds, inland lakes, private reservoirs, you name it. Normally he would have a small team of local knuckleheads on the deck with him to sweep the waterbeds clean and sort through anything valuable. That was where the real money was, of course, the things people threw away or carelessly lost. My uncle would clean it off and pawn it. He once found a landmine fused to a pile of rocks, dusted it off, and sold it to some army memorabilia collector. He claimed it was an unarmed mine found in the Pacific Theater. His grandpappy had brought it back from the war. I don't know if the collector actually believed my uncle's lies, or just thought armed rock was neat, but Uncle Cam made a nice chunk of change off that guy. During the summer I was his wheelman, hitching his boat to the back of my pickup and taking him across the state, gig to gig. Decent money for a college kid, but truly boring work. So, when he offered me to pick up the wheels during spring break this year, I respectfully declined. I thought that was the end of it, until he showed up at my parents' houseboat in tow, his right-hand man Cletus sulking at the front of his rental. I opened the back door after a chorus of frantic pounding and incessant ringing, and there stood Uncle Cam, not even 9 a.m. and already reeking of cigars drenched in scotch. He broke out in smiles when I opened the door and dragged me in for a headlock, tussling my freshly showered hair. I could feel the bristles of his 5 o'clock shadow digging into shoulders as he hugged me. "Davy, How the hell are ya? Thought you would have left for Daytona by now, he bellowed, looking past me. Yeah, farther around, I need his help with something. He and Ma left this morning, spending the weekend in Atlantic City, I explained. Figures told him I might need help this weekend since you were busy. He grumbled, his eyes starting to light up. Are you busy? Well, I don't officially leave until Sunday, I begrudged. A meaty paw slapped me on the back, shooting me out the door. I blinked and suddenly I was halfway up the driveway with him. Then listen, I need your help here. I got Cletus with me. He's pulling double duty with driving and all. He waved over to Cletus, who gave a dismissive wave of his hand. Whiny little cocksucker. But Silvio dropped out of the gig today. I need another set of hands.
What, on the boat? I've never even gone fishing, I protested.
What fishing? We hang out a little, drink some beer, and drag a net across a little lake up north. 5 hours work tops. Cut you in for He ain't getting a fucking % off of my shares. I heard Cletus fume from the rental.
Oh, with the mouth, this is a nice residential yacht prick.
Cam bellowed back. My uncle's Southie heritage always crept back into his tongue when he started to get angry. It's easy work, Davy. You'll get a nice piece of change to bring down to Florida with you, he said slyly. He was right, my scumbag uncle. I had all but run through my summer savings and was dreading have to borrow money from my folks when they came back. So it was with heavy reluctance that I climbed aboard my uncle's boat, bracing myself as Cletus lurched forward like he had never driven stick before in his life. The boat, the SS Stromboli, as my uncle called it, was titled upwards just enough to lug it around, but not so much that me and him went comfortably sitting in the cabin drinking. We still clung to our seats at every quick turn and steep hill, but it was a cozy enough ride. The Stromboli was a small fishing trawler my uncle had picked up at a police auction. It was tattered and weathered, yet fresh paint and sealant was slathered all over that baby as Uncle Cam dragged her all around the state. Cam explained the job to me as we made our approach. Wreckham County had a lake that had been nosed to public use since 1995. It had been a summer camp at one point, but that shut down due to a supposed E. coli outbreak. The lake was deemed toxic to the public and closed off. The rumor mill churned out some ridiculous gossip. The county was using it as a dump. The mob was using it to hide bodies. Occasionally, some kids would hope the fence and come home with skin rashes that would last for weeks and itch twice as long. Now, the county was losing money and wanted to revitalize a sense of community by reopening the old AMP. The area had to be decontaminated, of course, and that's where good old Uncle Cam came in. Now, this wasn't some deep cleaning operation. My uncle was a small fry. He usually got hired to do some light surveying of the depths and minor dredging. He and his band of idiots would spend hours sorting through anything they found on the deck, and God help me today, I was one of those idiots. After a while, we arrived at the shore, as it were. Cletus nearly killed himself backing up and up to drop the boat into the water, and the three of us broke our backs getting it out of the shallows. There was probably a safer and more efficient way to get the boat in, but we were cracked for time and a little buzzed at this point. My uncle fished for his treasure using a makeshift rake powered by a motor engine. The rake was 3 meters long and scooped at the end. He would slowly start at the end, then make his way across the muck, in a way that rarely got him stuck. It was long, boring work made easy by swapping tails and drinking brew. The lake, named Erin, stunk to high heaven. Like moss had crawled inside a crab hole to die. The funny thing was the water was fairly clear. It had a slight orange tint to it, but it looked like you could dive right in. The high noon sun shone down on it, twinkling like mountain rain. There were patches of pure orange foam cropped up on the surface. It looked like bulky foam drifting down the way. Cletus and I sat on the bow as Cam glided softly through the water. Cletus poked me in the ribs and pointed towards a nearby foam cluster. That there is salmon spunk, he spat. It's close to spawning season. Lovely, I grumbled. Nah man, good news for us. Water's clean enough for fish, it's clean enough for humans. He summarized. Makes our job a breeze. It already is till we have to muck through the muck. I stammered. Cletus eyed me with wide eyes. Honestly, we find nothing ill be happy. Your uncle ain't from around here. Lot of stories about this stretch of wet, he mused. He told me bits and pieces. I indulged. Cletus laughed when I mentioned the mob and toxic dump tales. Nah man, that's a bunch of bull to weed out the tourists. The real story, well, you know this place used to house a camp, right? It was some uppity sleepaway for rich parents to dump their kids for the summer so they could learn to traverse the great outdoors. He rolled his eyes. It was all controlled. They'd line up some BS activities to make him feel like real outdoorsmen, like archery with foam tips or kayaking back and forth 5 meters or so. He took a swig from his beer and savored it. Of course, they picked a horrible place for a camp. Locals knew to stay away during the summer season. Heat brought out some mighty angry critters. The waters here run deeper than you'd think. He trailed off, letting my vulnerable imagination fill in the rest. What is this? The outer limits? I scoffed. Cletus shook his head sadly. Call it whatever you want. Locals like me know the tales of the Erin Lake horror. How it would scuttle out of the depths at night, the scent of fresh meat drawing it in. The county covered it up, of course. The real reason the camp closed. They said the thing crawled from cabin to cabin, crushing those kids to bit with powerful pincers. He made a faux clawing motion with his arms, crossing them to his chest like a mini T-Rex. The Camp Erin slaughter was what it was called. Cops came and all they found were bits and pieces strewn about. They never did find what did it. They did hear it though, a mournful chittering sound, like a giant crab howling at the moon. He imitated that sound, coughing at the end of his mimicry and taking another swig. Some say you can still hear that sound at night, as the beast hunts for its next meal. They say you won't even see it until its claws are wrapped around your neck, snapping it in two. He finished his ghost story with a ghastly tone, eyeing something behind me. That's when I felt the icy grip of crustacean-scented pincers pinch my neck. I hollered like a banshee, jumping up and tossing my beer at the culprit, only to be met with the belly-busting laughs of Cletus and Cam. Cletus was falling out of his chair. That sickening infection's donkey braying he was making made my stomach churn. Cam was holding a stuffed lobster in his hands, one of the little nautical knickknacks he kept in the cabin. Scorn and embarrassment slapped me in the face till I was beet red as I composed myself. You fucking douchebags, was any of that even real? I screeched at them. Course, not your fucking mush guy. Matter with you? My uncle roared with laughter. I noticed the boat was still chugging along smoothly. Cletus sat back on his chair, a shit-eating grin upon his face. All good fun, laddybuck. Hey Cam, shouldn't you get back to manning the wheel before we scuff the shore? He hinted. Cam waved his hand and went to steal my beer from the rickety camp chair I had been using. It's on auto, we have about 10 minutes before we hit shallows. Hot as hell back there, you never fixed that AC. Like I told you. Did you? Cam accused. Before Cletus could attempt to defend his handiwork, the boat surged forward and came to a grinding halt. Cam dropped the beer, shattering it all over the deck. He cursed and sprinted back to the cabin. The dredge motor was grinding its gears in protest, black smoke beginning to bellow out of it. I rushed over to help Cletus turn it off as Cam struggled with the boat engine. I could feel the vibrations putter to a pitiful end under my feet as we fought the motor. The chain we used to bring up the scoop was entwined around it, something at the bottom too heavy for Cam's Frankenstein engine. Cam rushed out of the cabin as the motor started to wither and die. He pushed us aside and grabbed the chain and began uncoiling it, grunting as he tried to assist it. We joined him, of course, pulling that borderline 200-pound anchor up, fighting the pressure of a lake that wanted to keep whatever we had snared. I could feel blisters start to form and burst on my hand as I scrapped that soggy chain upward, tossing aside as much as we could to give the motor some leverage. It was purring now, as we did its job for it. Finally, we could see the scoop at the surface of the water. Through the muck and pebbled, we could make out a massive log dead center. It looked like one of the scythe-like prongs had impaled the thing and had lodged it into the lake bed. It was only by sheer luck it didn't tear the motor outright and only forced a dead stop. As our treasure bobbed to the surface, Cam reached forward and tried to get a good grip on it. We joined him, and on the count of 3 we brought up the scoop, breaking our backs in the process. We dropped the thing onto the deck. An audible thud rang out. It stank to high heaven, much worse than the shore. The scoop lay on the deck, covered in muck and weeds. Embedded in it were small rocks, a couple of shells and a few metal bits gleaming in the afternoon sun. Beer cans by the looks of it. Part of me wondered if we had just hauled in our own garbage. The jewel of this display was the massive rotted out log. It was blackened and moist to the touch, soggy wood splintering out like a jaded lover. There was some of the orange foam covering it, and I grimaced at the sight of it. Cam kneeled down, covering his face with his shirt. Cletus looked ill at the sight of it, which I took some small pleasure in. Cam got a curious look on his face and reached towards the log. With a grunt, he turned it over. Where the prong had impaled, we could see a dim glow upon closer inspection. It seemed there were hundreds of small pearl-like objects fused to the inside. Cam whistled, impressed at the amount. Cletus and I leaned in as well, marveling at the sight. It was like something out of a fairy tale, treasure surrounded by a golden aura. Except these weren't pearls, they were too clumped together, and you could make out tiny black embryos in them. Cam stepped back, rubbing his chin deep in thought. Too close to the spawning grounds, I knew it. But you don't listen, Cletus grumbled. Or you didn't say shit. Who are you kidding? Davy, go get one of the containers from out back, start filling it with water, he commanded, not taking his eyes off the prize. I obliged, though unsure of what the point was. I could hear Cletus arguing my point for me as I searched the cabin for the opaque plastic bin. Look at that big-ass thing. Why are we gonna lug it around? He complained. Because we're sitting on a gold mine here, Cled. Look at this, a barrel full of caviar fresh from the sea, he proclaimed proudly. You aren't serious. Cletus balked. Christ on the cross, Cam. This is a new low. He sounded disgusted. Wipe that pus off your face. Only schmucks who eat caviar to begin with are rich snobs with too much time on their hands. Who's this hurting? He countered. You'll get your cut. I could hear my uncle sneering. I came back with a container and helped the two of them hide the log in the cabin. There was some more bickering about the dubious scam my uncle was trying to pull, but I don't know why. Cletus was surprised. Love him or hate him, that was just who Cam was. The trouble started when we tried to hide back to shore. The engine sputtered and gagged on itself, refusing to even lightly paddle to the shoreline. It turned up that snare trap had done more damage to the engine than we thought and would be stuck adrift in the middle of the lake until we fixed the stalling problem. The attempts to fix the engine resulted in the three of us laying anchor and drinking more beer. Cletus claimed he could do it no problem, but Cam refused to let him touch it since he fixed the egg. He ended up calling Silvio and offering him double his normal cut to drive out here and paddle over to us with spare parts. Frankly, it was a beautiful day out, all things considered. So I think my uncle was just happy for the excuse to lay outside in the sun and drink. So that's what we did for the next couple of hours, huddled together, basking in the late sun, down to our last case. The air had gotten a tad murky, and my vision blurred as I downed my 10th beer of the day. We swapped tales and bicker over small things. As is tradition in our family, I suppose. The Mariani temper always flared up when my uncle started drinking, and I wasn't too far behind as well as we listened to that smashed redneck ramble on. Know him telling you boys, they don't hold a candle to cash, senior or junior, he slurred. The gall on this guy, Uncle Cam. You hearing it? I barked at my uncle. Him 2 feet away from you. Why you shouting? He winced. Cash is a damn phony. You know, he never really served time. Big meth. Can't he? Hey, you take that back. He shot a man in Reno. Why would he lie about that? He babbled. Cam roared with laughter, then turned to me. You doing good in school, kid? Have any problems with the deans or whoever you know? You can come to me, you. He grasped me with his gorilla grip and gave me a loving yet sullen look. I nodded, and he patted me on the back. Cletus looked oddly envious and was about to speak up when we heard it. It was a piercing hissing noise, like air escaping a tire mixed with the wild cry of a cicada. We sat silent, bewildered at the bizarre sound. Cletus shifted uneasily, sobering up in his expression. Silsay, when he was getting here, he whispered to Cam. He shrugged his shoulders in response. Last I heard, he was probably about 20 minutes away. Had to get his frigging canoe out of storage, he said. Cam chuckled. That shriek rang out once more, sounding closer this time. It felt hot all of a sudden, like the humidity had been dialed up to 12. I wiped sweat from my brow and noticed the ghastly pale look on Cletus. His eyes were shifting back and forth, looking past us to the water. The sun was low now, the sky violet with a dying orange hue. Mad on this heat, Cam muttered. We should throw that log back in, Cletus uttered suddenly. Cam shot him a look. Selling bogus caviar isn't even the worst thing you guys have pulled. I laughed. Remember the shaved cat fiasco a couple years back? Cam winced at the memory, but Cletus didn't let up. That ain't it, too weird looking the eggs might be. I don't know, poisonous or something. He blubbered out, grasping for straws as he evaded the truth. This was met by another round of laughter, cut short by another cry. It sounded like it had risen below us from the depths. Cam got up, confusion pouring out of his face. Cletus frantically got up towards the cabin. "You touch that fucking log, they'll find you at the bottom of this goddamn lake." Uncle Cam roared. "Damn it all, we need to give it back before it's upon us," he raved, a hesitant look in his eyes. "That little prank I pulled on you, I might have embellished it, but it's real," he confessed. Now it was our turn to look confused. Cletus rambled on. "My daddy worked at the camp when he was young. 2 kids snuck out onto the lake one night, and only one came back, pale and cold as a witch's teat. He claimed they had swum out to an old raft, and something had grabbed the other kid and pulled him under. They scoured the lake, but well, they didn't find hide nor tail of him. The Lost Boys folks claimed the other had drowned him and threatened to sue. Camp director had a friend on city council and got it squashed though." "Well, that's all very tragic, Cletus, but he saw it. My daddy, it had crawled onto the beach to savor its kill. He said it was 5 meters tall and was scarfing that poor boy's insides out when he came upon it. They didn't believe him, but that's how the rumor started." Cletus was trembling now. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. He believed it for sure. "Bunch of horseshit spewing out of that drunken gab of yours. They ought to put a muzzle on this prick." Cam nudged me. Cletus looked like he was about to explode when the boat started to violently shake. We bobbed and weaved like we had just gotten our sea legs, and a loud thump from the bottom of the boat was heard beneath. That shrill cry now, accompanied by a scuttling noise, like something was scurrying along the side of the boat. Cletus grabbed the nearest thing he could, an old fishing pole. Its wires dangled and frayed around the rod. "Clet, stay away from the side." The tone of my uncle's voice was filled with fear now, and I was quickly sobering up to the idea that maybe Cletus knew what he was talking about. Without looking, he jabbed the pole downwards off the side, hitting something squishy that was clinging to the side of the boat. Another hiss as the thing cried out and raised itself over the rail. I can't begin to describe this horrid monstrosity that had climbed aboard. It was at least 4 meters tall and vibrant in color, like someone had dunked a rainbow on it. It had 2 boxing glove-like claws that clung to its side mantis style. 2 bulbous black eyes on stalks swayed in the late afternoon heat, its mouth filled with tendrils and mandibles. It flung its still submerged 3-pronged tail in the air, squeeing as it rained down rancid lake water upon the deck. Cletus stepped back, shivering at the sight of this massive shrimp beast. The thing raised one claw and in one quick motion thumped it towards Cletus' head. His head snapped back instantly, the muscles and veins in his neck simply tearing away at the speed of light. Within an instant he was dead, his head flying back towards us. His face was a mangled bloody pulp, yet I could still see the terror in his eyes as they looked back at me. Blood spurted and gurgled from his neck like a water fountain as his still twitching body clung to the pole, a vice grip seizing in the final moments. The body collapsed to the deck as the boat shifted to one side, making a horrid groaning sound. The beast sized us up, as prey or a threat to its young. Probably both, if I am being honest. My uncle grabbed me by the chest and dragged me out of my stupor as the thing roared and began to. They quickly closed the gap between us. We managed to squeak into the cabin and slammed the shoddy wooden door behind us. It eyed us through the porthole and began thumping away at the door, every hit splintering the already weak wood. Looking around the crowded cabin, I eyed the water-filled container and made a mad dash for it. I got it out and offered it to the beast, who hissed at the sight of it and pounded on the door harder. Cam pulled me back and stepped towards the log, raising a foot over it and looked the thing squarely in the eyes. It paused in its assault and Cam got a bold look on him. Yeah, you overgrown prawn cocksucker, you understand this, don't you? He said uneasily. His eyes didn't leave it as he spoke to me. Davy, I want you to go into the overhead drawer up there and get my gun. He tried to sound calm, and I obliged his request. The overhead was filled with papers and trinkets, and a few old bottles of his favorite scotch. Tucked away in the corner was a 9mm. I grabbed it. It felt heavy in my hand and my uncle motioned for it. I quietly gave it to him, and he pointed it at the shrimp, who let out a low chortle, a growl, I think. My uncle slowly lowered his foot and backed away from the container, nudging it closer to the door in fact. The shrimp took its K to barge down the door and hiss at us, drooling all over the place like a rabid wolf. Take it, come on and just get out of here, Cam muttered. as cool and collected as he could be. The thing unfurled a pincer and dragged the container over to it, cooing as it did so. Still, it seemed locked onto us both, ready to pounce. We were just barely out of its striking distance, yet I saw how quickly it could scuttle. My uncle knew this as well and told me this. "Sorry for dragging you into this, Davy. You get out of here," he uttered. With that, he opened fire on the beast, pushing me aside. I fell to the ground and scurried up as the thing rushed past me, tanking at least 3 square shoots to the head. It thumped my uncle square in the chest, and he flew towards the cabin window, shattering it instantly. The shrimp was about to turn towards me when another shot rang out from the deck, blowing one of its stalking eyes off. The menace turned its attention back to the deck, and I ran out of there, jumping straight into the water. A blast of ice shocked me to the core as I began swimming to shore, wincing every time I heard a shot. Cam was wheezing at the thing, cursing at it with every slur he knew with all the vigor a dying man could muster. Halfway to shore, I heard a loud splash behind me, but I just kept going. I didn't stop till my feet barely sand and I was rushing out of there as fast as I could. I scurried to the ground and looked back at the boat. It was dead quiet on the lake. No guns, no monster, no cat. I was breathing heavily then, my eyes stinging from the putrid water. I could taste metal in my mouth, and I coughed up a thick green slime. I could only imagine came from when Cam shot the creature's chassis. I saw on the beach, curled up and shivering. I waited for any sign that Cam was okay. I was in a trance. I didn't hear the rattle of the caddy pulling up behind me. A door slammed shut behind me, and I turned, startled at the sight of Silvio standing beside his caddy, canoe strapped to the roof. He looked at me dumbfounded. "Davy, fuck's Cam at?" When I eventually talked him into grabbing his gun and heading out there, we found the boat slathered in green blood and Cam unconscious on the bow of the Stromboli. We rushed over. His hard, raspy breaths was unbearable to hear. It sounded like his entire chest cavity had collapsed. We carefully moved him out and brought him to the nearest hospital. I should mention that there was no sign of the mantis or the egg-filled log. I sat with Silvio at the urgent care, hoping any news about Cam would be good. Sil assured me that nothing would happen. He'd be fine. He also mentioned that mess on the boat, whatever happened there, would stay between us. He would head back the next morning with some friends of his and tidy up the area. I tried to protest, but he assured me it would be no trouble at all. Finally, I got the news that Cam was awake and wanted to speak with me. I found him lying on the hospital bed, his chest wrapped in so much gauze he looked like Al Capone if he was a mummy. He was hooked up to some kind of IV and slurred when he spoke. He had a grin on him, saying he got the thing, and we were gonna be rich. I didn't have the heart to tell him that it was gone. Not then anyway. This was a week ago now, and I'm writing this in the waiting room. I offered to drive him back in. Least I could do for the crazy bastard after he saved my life. Sil and his friends cleaned up the boat, but still found no trace of the creature. Knowing the circles Uncle Cam runs in, I can only imagine what they really think went down on that boat, but I digress. I can hear him creaking jokes in his room, asking the nurses out on a night on the town. He's a card my Uncle Cam, but I think the next time he asks me to go on a job with him, I'm not going. Not for all the caviar in the world. I'm a cop in Charlotte. We got a call about a baby crying in the woods. What we found wasn't human. This happened a couple nights ago and I gotta write it down, thinking it and saying it sound too crazy. I've been with CMPD long enough to know the worst calls always start the same way. Can you check out a noise complaint? Sounds like a baby crying. That came over dispatch just after 2:00 a.m. I'm a dad, so of course I'm gonna go make sure everything's okay. Area was West Charlotte, just past Mount Holly Road. Old woods near a defunct substation Duke Energy fenced off years ago. I knew the area. Dense, overgrown, not the kind of place you walk a stroller. It is where a lot of people camp if they don't have homes. So my brain made the call that some poor mama was out there with her baby. I was wrong. Caller didn't leave a name. Just said the sound came from deep in the trees. Some drunk high on his boat, probably out trying to catch some blue cats, heard spooky sounds in the woods. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I went alone. Protocol said I should wait for backup, but I didn't think much of it. Probably a fox. They make noises that'll raise the hairs on your neck. That or someone dumped a cat in the brush. Or at worst, it's a damn bobcat. Reason I know this is, I've had my run-ins with them in the lake, Norman side of Charlotte, quite a few times. They are mean as hell, but trick you by sounding like a baby. I parked on the shoulder and walked about 15 minutes into the woods. No trails, just soft earth and low branches clawing at my vest. The deeper I went, the colder it got. The kind of cold that doesn't belong in Carolina in April, but it's there anyway, because the weather can't make up its damn mind. Then I heard it. Whoa, soft, weak, definitely a baby. A newborn? That's what I thought. It sounded like my baby girl, like the day she came home from the hospital. I froze. It was coming from ahead, somewhere beyond the next ridge. But it wasn't right. The cry looped. Same pitch, same rhythm, almost mechanical, like it had been recorded. I unholstered my flashlight and moved slow. That's when I saw the eyes, dozens of them, reflecting back in the dark. They stepped out together, silent, coordinated, a herd of white deer, albino, every single one bright as bone, antlers like coral, eyes red. There had to be 20 of them, just standing in the trees, blocking my path. They didn't run, didn't twitch, just stared. Their bodies looked off, like they were stitched together wrong, too tall, joints too low. One of them had legs that bent the wrong way entirely, and in the center of them stood one without antlers. Smaller, female, maybe. She opened her mouth in a way I had never seen a deer open its mouth, and from her mouth came the baby's cry. Wah. I know I couldn't see my reaction, but I know that all color from my body left me at once. I felt hot. I should have run. I didn't. I raised my light, and they turned, all of them at once. Walked back into the woods in perfect silence, vanishing between the trees, and the crying stopped. Just like that. I stayed there another 30 seconds before my legs started working again. I also might have pissed myself. Back at the cruiser, I tried to call it in. Static. My radio didn't work until I was 5 miles down the road. And brother, that was a long walk. Next morning, I came back with animal control. They found nothing, no prints, no fur, no signs of anything except a tooth in the brush. It was a human milk tooth. A baby tooth. Animal control guy said that's probably where the sound came from. A baby in the woods with a homeless mom. He shrugged his shoulders and chucked it in the woods. I don't know why, but I went and retrieved it afterward and took it home. Call me crazy. Whole department does now. They drug tested me after I gave my report. But here's the thing. Since I brought that tooth home, I've caught glimpses of white deer in my yard at night. When I'm driving out on patrol, they run out in front of me. I've heard babies crying from the woods behind my house. I hear babies crying when I'm hiking in the mountains about 200 miles away from Charlotte. I hear them before I go to bed. My daughter is 14. I don't have a baby. She doesn't even live with me. I'm divorced. And the worst thing is, I don't know where that tooth is now. And the reason I'm writing this is because as I sit here in my home, I'm watching my security cameras. There's a white deer in my yard. And now it's screaming and yelling and cursing. But it's not a baby's voice anymore. It's mine. Birth of a monster. Eric was barely even a year old. A blank slate. It was unclear what kind of man he would grow up to be. Although he seemed destined to not grow up to be much. He was an accident, and not a happy one. His parents didn't want children, but they also didn't want to get an abortion. And thus, little baby Eric was born, leaving his mama with stretch marks that she hated almost as much as she hated his dada for not pulling out in time. Now, he was sitting in front of the TV, so he'd be in mama and dada's line of sight as they watched their shows. Their gaze rarely shifted down to him. He could have crawled into the kitchen and started playing with knives, and they wouldn't even notice. But that didn't really matter, because he didn't really do much. He mostly kept to himself, playing with the few cheap toys that they gave him. He was quiet for his age, which was great, because if he wasn't, either mama or dada would have smothered him in his crib a long time ago. It was a winter night where the snow clouds had blotted out the stars. It was dark in their small, messy apartment, almost at the time when mama and dada would put Eric to bed. The only light came from the TV. It was a pretty crappy TV. It would have probably have been considered state-of-the-art back in the 90s, but now it was a hunk of junk. But it worked fine, and it bathed the living room in its white glow. Mama and Dada watched it a lot more than Eric. Occasionally they'd put on some colorful killed show for him, but mostly it would play their own stuff. But Eric would stare at it anyway. He saw a bit of stuff that was not appropriate for him, but it wasn't like he could understand it. One day, when Mama was flipping channels, she passed some cheesy old monster movie and stayed on it long enough for Eric to recognize the sight of a giant creature destroying a city. When she changed the channel, he started crying. Seeing how quickly it happened after switching it off, she changed it back to see if that would make any difference. Sure enough, he stopped crying and giggled almost immediately upon seeing the black and white mass destruction again. And so Mama left it on for a few minutes, just to shut him up. Eric could rarely process what is happening on TV, and his undeveloped memory could only recall a few scattered portions of his short life. But this was his strongest memory, and he could completely understand what was happening. And he loved it, because he lived in a big city like the one in the movie. The towers around him were so massive he wondered if they just went on forever into the sky. And the lack of love from his parents made him feel even smaller than he was. But now he could see that even the almighty city could be conquered. He wanted to be the creature, to show the world he wasn't so small and to be more powerful than everything around him, and to make them pay for ever making him feel small. When the rampage sequence was over, it cut to a scene of men in suits and hats talking, and Mama changed the channel again. To her relief, he did not protest. She muttered something under her breath about him wasting her time. But right now, Eric had his back to the TV. He sat cross-legged on the dirty carpet, aimlessly waving a couple wooden blocks in the air. He was a pitiful little boy. He was clad only in a ragged diaper. He hadn't been bathed in a few days, simply because Mama and Dada forgot, and he had amassed a slight odor. He was overweight for his age, and had a round belly that lay in his lap over the diaper, almost touching his legs. His face was as cute, except for emotional signs of hardship and neglect behind his eyes. Mama was on the couch with a beer in her hands. Even though it was relatively early on a Tuesday night, she had already drunk enough to feel a slight buzz. Dada sat on the couch beside her. His head was tilted back, his mouth hung open in an ugly expression, and he was snoring, an unpleasant sound, but not loud enough for Mama to consider waking him. At the commercial break, Mama stood up and left for the bathroom, leaving Eric alone with the still sleeping Dada. Upon seeing her getting up, Eric decided to get moving too. He pulled himself to his hands and knees and started to crawl. His belly dangled pathetically toward the ground and was pushed aside with every forward motion of his thighs. As soon as the door to the bathroom closed, he heard it. Eric. He turned toward the source of the whispering voice calling his name. It was unlike anything he heard before. He couldn't understand words, but he understood the voice perfectly. It was coming from the TV. A beer commercial was playing, but there was a faint shape over it, an almost imperceptible figure that others might have to squint to see over the image of happy young people drinking responsibly. But Eric was able to see it, because it was meant for him. It was little more than a silhouette, but that silhouette was comforting. It wasn't a human shape. Anyone else who saw it would call it a monster, but he felt safe around it. To him, it was like the silhouette of one of the creatures in those educational children's shows he'd watch when Mama or Dada was feeling nice. Come to me. I can make you into what you were meant to be.
Eric didn't know what that meant, but he trusted the figure. It made him feel safer and more loved than his parents ever had. So he crawled closer.
That's it. That's a good boy. Eric smiled at that. He was genuinely proud of himself for pleasing the figure. He stopped when he was right in front of the black painted metal stand the TV was placed on. Come on. I know you can do it. He still needed to get closer, but he wasn't sure if he could. No, he definitely could. The figure believed in him. It chose him. Slowly, he pulled himself up to his feet. He had never stood before, and he stumbled a little. But soon, and before he even realized it, he was up on his feet. He couldn't believe it. His legs were shaking, and he had to work to keep his balance. But he was standing. For the very first time. His parents couldn't see this, but the figure could. And that was all that mattered. Great job, Eric. The excited Eric excitedly did a little dance and almost fell over, but caught himself. He had never felt this happy before.
You're a big boy.
Why don't you let me make you an even bigger boy now? He was even more excited now, and did another gleeful dance. But this one actually succeeded in knocking him back down. Whoops, don't worry, you can do it again. And sure enough, He did pull himself up again, and it was easier this time. He held on to the TV stand to keep himself up. Great job. Now come to me. Right up to me. He leaned forward. He let go of the stand and pressed his hands to the screen. They held his face mere inches away from the screen. The TV stand pressed into his belly. Good boy. He felt something coursing from the screen into his hands, down his arms, and then all through his body. It felt warm. It gave him a pleasant tingling sensation in his stomach, but it also filled him with a feeling of power. He felt like he could take on the whole world by himself, like the monster in that movie. The world around him seemed to disappear. Even the cold metal of the TV stand against his chest started to fade away. It felt softer, even began to bend around him as if he was instead leaning on a pillow. He felt like a fire was burning inside him, and with it came a sensation to let it out and burn everything around him. Why shouldn't he? The world was cold and indifferent to him, so why shouldn't he force it to notice him? Eric, get back from the TV. Eric didn't understand what she said, but he recognized the voice of his mama. Come on, she said as she grabbed her son under the armpits. He started crying as she dragged him away from the figure. The cries woke up Dada. What the hell's going on? Eric was putting his face right up to the TV screen, she replied. I just pulled him back. After a brief pause, Dada asked, Hold on. He had his face up to the screen.
That's what I said.
So he pulled himself right up too? Dada asked. As in, to his feet. Can he stand now? Mama paused. Shit. Can he? She set the crying infant on the floor again. Come on, stand for Mama. Eric stopped crying as soon as Mama let go of him. But instead of standing, he crawled back to the TV.
That little boy will never be able to hold that lard ass up, Dada joked meanly.
Like you're one to talk, Mama said, gesturing to Dada's own beer belly. Fuck you, said Dada, before taking another swig from his drink. When Eric reached the TV, he pulled himself up quicker than ever and put his hands back on the screen. Shit, our boy's growing up, I guess, said Dad. I said get back from there. Mama pulled Eric back again, and he started crying again. He feels warm. Fuck. He doesn't have a fever, does he? I hope not. I can't deal with that shit. Eric started writhing in Mama's hands, arms reaching out to the comforting glow of the television. Okay, if you're going to be like that, you're going to bed, Mama scoffed. The cries intensified as she took him away. As she left, Dada noticed a slight semicircular indentation on the TV stand directly in front of the screen. Mama took him into a hallway with a hardwood floor. At the end of the corridor was the front door. The wall on Mama's left was adorned with rooms, including Eric's bedroom. There he'd be plopped down into his cheap wooden crib, where he'd be separated from the embrace of the TV figure by the wooden bars, the door, which he'd have to be twice as tall to even reach the doorknob. Don't worry, he heard from the living room. I knew they wouldn't let us let it happen for long. We'll go further when the time comes. No, Eric didn't want to wait. He wanted more now. He cried harder and started flinging his arms at his mama. He hated her. Stop. That's not going to do anything. He'll just let you cry it out in your room. But just before she reached the door to his room, his arm grasped at her neck, firmly, an unnatural grip for someone his age. A shocked mama froze dead in her tracks. He pulled his arm away, ripping out a piece of her neck. This part of her felt wet and meaty in his hand. A red liquid spurted from where he ripped it out. It looked so vibrant and colorful. He loved it. Mama put the hand to her throat. She tried to hold her son with her other arm, but she was too weak, and he fell to the floor. His head collided with the floor with a sickening thunk that would have killed him just a few minutes ago. But now, he didn't even feel it. He just laughed, picked himself up to a sitting position, and watched his mama fall to her knees. She was making a funny gurgling sound, and the red stuff sprayed on the floor and onto Eric. What the hell's going on back there? Mama heard Dada say from the living room. Eric held the piece of throat tighter in his fist. The red juices ran down his arm. In his excitement, he threw the flesh back in Mama's face. Finally, Mama fell over. Little baby Eric could not quite grasp why she did not get up again. He did not know what the red stuff that gathered around her body was, but whatever it was, whatever he did, filled him with excitement. He wanted to do that again. Answer me, damn it, Dada said, approaching the hallway. What was that noise? And then he saw what had happened. He didn't hear the crack of Eric's head over the gurgling, and even that didn't sound to him like his wife dying. He had no idea what he expected to see, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight of his wife lying in a pool of blood and their son sitting in the puddle grinning from ear to ear. The blood Eric was sitting in had already soaked through the bottom of his diaper, turning it almost a solid red. The blood had also splattered across his face and body, yet he happily splashed his hands in the puddle around his mama. Eric absent-mindedly brought his hand up to his mouth and licked the red stuff on it. It tasted good, so he started to eat more of it. He rubbed his hands in the puddle to gather more red. Finally, Dida got over his shock just enough to start moving again. He ran to his son, picked him up, and carried him away from his dead mother. He ran with him into the kitchen, where he sat him down on the floor. He picked up the phone and dialed. Eric looked around. Mama and her puddle of fun red liquid weren't here, but maybe he could play with Dada. 911, what's your emergency? Before Dada could answer, Eric grabbed this ankle and pulled it back. There was a loud snap. Dada fell to the ground. Is everything okay? He heard from the receiver that had landed on the counter above him. He looked back at his leg, which was bent at the shin in a grotesque fashion. Did his son really do that to him? Did a baby really break his leg? Eric grabbed the foot again. No. This time he pulled so hard the foot broke off. Dada screamed as even more red leaked out of him. Eric nearly doubled over laughing. No. Bad Eric, Dada said weakly. What exactly does one say in a situation like this? Eric played with the foot for a few seconds. After he accidentally poured some of its red liquid on his belly, he threw it aside and smeared the blood all over himself. To Dada, it looked as if he was putting war paint on his body. Eric, why wasn't Dada going away like Mama did? He wasn't much long for this world, but Eric didn't know that. Maybe he needed to hit somewhere else. So he stood up and walked over to Dada's face. For the first time, Dada was seeing his son really walk. Any other parent would have been proud of him. Under any other circumstances, he'd only be mildly pleased. But now, he was scared for his life. Eric was just a tyke, but from the angle that Dada was looking up at him, he looked almost like a giant. His steps were clumsy, but self-assured, and he never looked like he was going to fall. When he reached Dada's face, he stood over him for just a moment. In a brief burst of excitement, he laughed, and his tiny round belly, which now seemed massive, shook mockingly. Eric was a growing boy, although what he was growing into was horrifying. And with that, Eric lunged forward and purposely fell onto Dada's head. It cracked open, spewing the red liquid everywhere, but also a lot of a pink squishy substance too. Eric laughed and pulled himself up. He looked down at the mush that was once Dada's head. Yeah, that should do it. Wow, you're even better than I thought. Eric danced with excitement. Yet again. It would have been cute if not for the fact that his every inch of his chest, and much of his face, arms and legs, was now covered in blood, and he had little pieces of his Dada's brain clinging to his flesh. I wasn't expecting you to do that to your mommy and daddy with just the power I gave you. Now that they're out of the way, do you want to come back to me for more? Despite having only been able to walk for a few minutes, Eric almost ran all the way to the TV. The police traced Dada's 911 call to his apartment, and soon there was a police officer knocking at his door. When nobody answered, he was forced to kick down the door and barge into Eric's apartment. The first thing he saw was the body of a woman in the corridor to the living room, lying in a pool of blood. He reported it into his walkie-talkie before continuing through the corridor with a hand on his gun. Before reaching the living room, he heard what sounded like a brief cooing of a baby deeper inside the way. It filled him with dread. Some poor baby just lost his mother, and might have even seen it. And at that age especially, that's the kind of thing that fucks up a child for the rest of their lives. But when he finally got a full view of the living room, the scene was nothing like he could have imagined. The sound came from a small pudgy infant, covered in blood, but seemingly unharmed. He was leaning on a small outdated TV. His hands were pressed firmly against the screen, his face inches away, staring with so much intensity, it was hard to believe he made any sound at all. It looked so unnatural that it took the officer a moment to even notice the headless corpse in the kitchen to his left. But the child was even creepier. The TV he was looking at alternated between shots of a landscape of rubble and shots of dead bodies. The officer reached toward the child to reassure himself that he would react in a natural way and alleviate the uneasy feeling he had. "Hey buddy," he whispered comfortingly. "Are you okay?" But when his hand touched the child's bare back, it felt like putting his hand on a hot stove. He cried out in pain, jerked his hand back, and looked at his red, burnt palm. When he looked up again, he saw that the child was seemingly going through the metal stand the TV was sitting on. His body had dug into the stand until it had created a hole that he fit perfectly in. The edges of the stand reached a little over halfway to his back. The officer then noticed the smell of burning and saw the thin ribbon of smoke coming from the indentation. Hot liquid metal and black paint dripped and sizzled onto the floor below and streamed down the curve of the child's belly. The TV had been pressed right up against the wall, and when the officer looked a little closer, he could see that the child's hands were on their way through the glass as well. There was obviously something very wrong with this child. Finally, the child's hands went through the screen. He fell forward a little from the lack of the screen support, but laughed it off as he took his arms out. Eric looked through the hand-shaped holes in the black screen and saw the face of the figure, clearly for the first time. "Looks like your mommy and daddy did a good job raising a boy like you." Then the screen exploded outward, and he felt a cold wind escaping into the world. He pulled himself away from the stand, admiring the deep impression he'd made on it. He put a hand on his belly as if congratulating it on a job well done. The red stuff that had soaked it was already dried, and on his lower stomach area, it was joined by thin black streaks of hot metal. A few pieces of the pink thing in Dada's head still clung to his chest, but now they looked blackened. He turned around to see a stranger in a blue suit behind him. He took a few steps closer to him. His steps were no longer awkward or clumsy. The officer backed away. He was scared to touch him again. He was afraid of him. How could he be afraid of a baby? Of what he could do to him? Despite everything he saw, a part of him still felt stupid. But the rest of him knew this was not what he looked like. Not anymore. Thankfully, the child simply fell into a sitting position. Eric didn't even realize he was lifting off the ground at first. It just looked like the stranger was getting smaller, until he saw that the room was getting lower too, and started to realize he couldn't feel the ground beneath him. He looked down and was pleased to see the ground a few feet beneath him. He was flying, and his excitement only grew when the changes started. The features that defined him as a cute, pudgy infant melted away, replaced by something more monstrous, more demonic, more cool. He looked back up at the stranger. He had a look on his face that Eric now recognized as fear, and now he finally turned to run away. But Eric didn't worry. He'd catch up to him. He knew he'd always catch his prey. As a matter of fact, the whole world was his prey now. His whole life had led up to this moment. The bliss. I'm pretty upset right now. It's probably because the stench of Mom's body is really starting to bother me. Every time I go downstairs to the fridge, I have to walk right by her, rotting away at the dinner table. I always end up smelling like death after. Even my ice-cold filtered fridge water tastes like it. It really sucks. The worst part is that I can't even go over to a friend's house because most of them are either too busy with jobs or college to hang out, or they've gone and offed themselves too. Some of them didn't even tell me beforehand. Can you believe that? I only found out that my buddy Eric shot himself because of those bliss ads you see all over the socials these days. He was in a hot tub surrounded by famous topless supermodels with most of his frontal lobe and forehead completely missing. I wouldn't have taken him for that kind of guy. But I guess that the bliss looks just like that for plenty of other guys too. There was also a number at the bottom of the screen, and the words "Bliss yourself now" in a bright cherry red font. It burned into your eyes. Literally. The adverts use a cognitive worm to force you to see the words and numbers for a minute. Even if you look away, or if you close your eyes, they use real customers in their marketing. I guess they don't need to be dishonest. But good God, do I still hate those ads? I mean, just because some people can afford the bliss doesn't mean that I want to be reminded of it every day, let alone have it burned into my vision for exactly 59 seconds. I can't deny that it's a pretty good marketing campaign though. Ever since they came out with the bliss and the Daedalus pill, it's all anybody wants to spend money on. I remember in 2051, back when it was announced, I was still a young kid. It was this scientist entrepreneur that went on the 32nd season of Shark Tank Unlimited. Hi Sharks, my name is Dr. Dexter, and I can solve every problem you have in life. He took out a packet of these little red pills. May I present to you the Daedalus pill, a brand new revolutionary way to live, or rather, to die. There's an ominous musical stinger. Dexter was speaking in that perfect sales cadence, the same kind I'll need to train my future kids to use. Using brand new cutting-edge pharmaceutical technology, my colleagues and I have developed a way to isolate the soul from the rest of the brain. Afterwards, we trap it in a micro-reality. We call it the bliss, a perfect, personal paradise generated from the soul's own subconscious. All the customer has to do is sever ties with their home dimension, and they'll be in heaven. Literally, one of the sharks, a withered, hairless man with smooth skin in place of his eyes, laughed. "Oh please, doctor, we don't know that much about pharmacology." Another ominous television music stinger. More laughter from the other sharks. Essentially, all the customer has to do is take the pill, and then take their own life. Yet another damn stinger. Their soul will end up in a tailored paradise. Family and loved ones can even share their own micro-reality together. All you have to do is tick a box on the sign-up forum. Is it safe? One of the other sharks asked. A woman with so much cosmetic work done that her face could only smile. At least she thought it looked like a smile.
Absolutely, let me prove it. Please let me bring my beloved wife onto the stage.
So, he brought his wife on stage. I remember how fidgety she was, her skin shining from the sweat and the camera lights. He handed her the packet of pills and she hesitantly swallowed one. Then, the doctor pulled a revolver out from the waistband of his jeans.
"You guys are about to watch the magic happen,"
he said, putting the end of the barrel to the bridge of her nose. His wife was crying, face scrunched by these deep, body-shaking sobs. But it didn't matter. Pop! Now she was on the floor, and most people wouldn't be able to identify her face as a face. Dr. Dexter casually reloaded while a box-like television was rolled out by assistants, the wheels passing right through the growing pool of brainy mush. One of the assistants picked up a chunk of frontal lobe and shoved a sensor into it. Now, here's the really great part. We've developed a way to record inside the bliss. Sharks, watch the screen very carefully. Oh, and obviously we never record it without the customer's consent. The sharks and the world watched as the doctor's wife walked down a perfect, pristine beach, hand in hand with beautiful children. The upper half of her face was gone, but she was smiling. "Wow," the eyeless shark said, unimpressed. "Isn't that just incredible? Only $19.99 if you're buying from our website. This is a deal to die for, sharks. I'll meet you in the bliss," Dr. Dexter said before sticking the barrel in his mouth and pulling the trigger, and the sharks exploded in loud, uproarious applause as the doctor's body crumpled to the ground, hooting and hollering in short bursts like chimpanzees.
Wow, doctor, this is a really impressive idea. You seem like a really smart guy. How about this? They'll give you $150K in funding and I get a 25% share in your company. The eyeless shark said. His tune changed completely.
The smiling shark retorted immediately. "Oh, come on, Jerome. This product has me written all over it, and you're trying to rip him off. Ugly freak. How about this, doctor? I'll get you $150K in funding, and I get a 50% stake in your company." Her face looked like a mask. "Well, doctor, what do you think? Do we have a deal?" she asked, and the camera cut back to the two corpses on stage. I remember that you could see flecks of them on the camera lens. It didn't really matter that he was dead. Dr. Dexter was still the world's first multi-trillionaire. Nearly $1 billion of those little red pills had been officially sold, all over the world. Now my life sucks because of it. My mom bought a second-hand pill with my college fund and I have to walk past her every time I refill my water. Would get her removed, but paying for something like that would take away from our own Daedalus pill fund. And my dad and I are both too lazy or squeamish to deal with her ourselves. I can't even go to the cinema to distract myself because stupid Hollywood isn't making good movies anymore. All the A-listing actors and actresses screwed off to the bliss the first chance they got, and now all the new movies have to use inexperienced amateurs. Same with directors, music producers, everything. All the best talents are dead. It's sure, I could watch an AI-generated movie with the old stars, but it's just not the same, you know? At least I can still watch old streams and videos, even though most of my comfort creators went into the bliss a long time ago. You see, there was a whole trend of influencers trying to outdo each other by going out in the most insane ways possible. With a quick search, you can find hours and hours of compilations of people ending their own lives on stream. Guns, jumping, vehicle accidents, fire, needles, anything you can imagine. Somebody's done it. These videos have millions of views. The creators would take sponsors from the company to get the first pill. And the more viral the death, the more pills would go to the creators' loved ones. It was all fantastic marketing for the masses. At least, that's how it worked. Until Jake Paul got into some post-mortem controversy when he decided to hang himself from the same tree where his brother found that body a few decades ago. The internet got mad about it because it was old news and uninteresting, and the company banned all sponsors after that. It was probably just an excuse because the trend wasn't profitable anymore. But I still blame the washed-up bastard. I grew up on those death videos. They're nostalgic, and they meant a lot to me. This guy was like 60 and still chasing his 2020s era fame at everyone's else's expense. The prick. Get a new gimmick. Anyway, I still think that Senator Jimmy Donaldson probably beat out everybody though. He shot himself into space with a couple other billionaires and politicians, and they all went outside without suits on. My local news station broadcasted it live. It was crazy. I read somewhere that one of the bodies is on orbit to collide with the sun. My dad's been really mean to me lately, always telling me to get out of my, quote, filthy room and get a job, so that we can both die sooner. I don't even spend that much time in my room. And even if I did, it's only because all my friends are in the bliss or working. All the fun places cost too much money anyway. I spend most of my time going on walks nowadays. LA is a lot quieter now that so many people have died, and it's honestly pretty cool. It's like an apocalypse happened or something. A nearly empty city littered with the skeletons people haven't bothered to clean up yet. There's still plenty of living people around, of course. There's still asshole drivers who try to hit pedestrians, and I still don't go out at night. Most of them blend together. Besides this one guy I think about a lot. This homeless guy. He used to follow me around sometimes and beg for money. The guy was saving literally every cent for a pill. He even sold his shirt, traded his pants in for some cash, and a pair of torn Simpsons branded swim trunks. The guy saved everything he could. Eventually it got to the point where he wasn't eating enough, and he got so frail and weak that he couldn't even walk anymore. Some loser ended up stealing from him because the poor guy couldn't defend himself. When I found out, I felt so bad. I even bought him a sandwich. Please, miss, please get that food out of here. I can go on for a few more days without it. I need to make the money back, miss. I need to save for a pill. I lost all I had. I need you to hire me instead. Do you have work? Please, I can stand. I can work. The guy was literally wasting away on the sidewalk, sitting in his Simpsons swim trunks. The man's skin was so dry, it was shrink-wrapped around his bones. It was like he was melting in the California sun, like a wax sculpture. He died a week later, and it messed me up for a while. When I went to return the food at the shop, the guy who served me was so confused. Who the hell tries to return a sandwich? He asked, and I told him about the homeless guy. Wow, really? You're a total saint. Wait, actually, how much do you make? I don't have a job. Oh my god, you really are a saint. Hey, I'm not supposed to do this, but keep the sandwich and the cash, girl. I still go to that sandwich shop sometimes. Not to buy anything else. Obviously, my dad would flip out, but just to sit around. It's got a nice view of the ocean. The guy who works the front counter, the guy who gave me my cash back, is around my age, maybe a bit younger. He's my friend now. Sort of. His name's Luke. What do you want your bliss to look like, Sal? That was his favorite question to ask when he came by to wipe the table I like to sit at. I don't know, man. I haven't really thought about it. Oh, really? Yeah. Sure. You probably want some real freaky shit. I bet you're into more emo guys. You'll have like a whole boy band just for yourself, right? No, you're always looking at the beach. Do you like surfer guys? Is it both? Gosh, I bet it's both. Your bliss is emo surfer guys for eternity. He chuckles to himself. Well, you'll need to work somewhere else for that. Sorry. Manager says no free handouts. Nah, I'm good. I kinda just want to sit in here, if that's alright. I'm not looking to steal your job. I still remember the look of perplexity he gave me when I said that. You're such a weirdo, dude. You know that? You don't come in here every day to beg for my job. You come in here and just sit instead, and stare out the window and shit. It's weird.
Oh, sorry, I just think the views are calming. That's all. If you need me to...
No, dude. It makes the place look open. You might attract some ladies here too. Nobody at my school wants me. It sucks. Luke realizes his rambling and stammers. Anyway, you know, in the Bliss, you'll be able to sit by this window as long as you want. I don't want to go to the Bliss, I say, and I watch the kid do a literal double take. You don't? Why not? I just don't, I say, and he sits down across from me at the table. You should still look for a job at least. You think I'm not trying? Nowhere is hiring. Luke nods, like he's heard it all before. You just need to change your mindset, girl. Start thinking like an entrepreneur. Stop being such a beta. Don't you listen to any self-help podcasts? Are you being serious right now? I ask, and Luke tries to keep a straight face. He fails. Haha, what the hell do you take me for? I'm not a sucker. Well, me neither, I say, and we both laugh. I'm jealous of your freedom sometimes. My manager's such a tool, he smells like radishes too. It sucks. When I got back home from the shop, my dad was crying again, drinking next to my fly-bitten mom. Her stink had soaked into most of our house at this point. That bitch fucking left us here. She took the damn money. I could be back in the good old days ice fishing with my college buddies in the Bliss, but she just had to be selfish. He's sniffling. What's ya, Dad? That sucks. Don't worry. I'm sure you'll be able to kill yourself soon. He brightens up a bit when I say this. I hope so, Sally, my dear. How's job hunting going? And with that, I left to go to my room. That's what I get for trying to cheer him up. Hey, you know what the worst part of it all is? I've already heard the worst part, so I don't turn around. She could have signed us on, if she wanted to, so that when we could afford to go to the Bliss, we could go to her world. But she didn't. She chose to cut us out. Her paradise is a world without us, dear. I closed the door behind me. Stupid day. Me personally, right? I'm going to smoke a big Cuban cigar every damn morning. 'Cause it's cool, and I love, like, the badass Castro aesthetic. Have you heard of the remastered Code remake? Not the old remakes. The new one? Sal? Luke's darting around the shop, sweeping as he talks, trying to do 5 different things at once. I don't answer his question. Anyway, I want to have this big kick-ass mansion too, with like a pool, a basketball court, all the stops. Oh my gosh, dude, I want a lazy river. I want a lazy river around the mansion like a moat. God, I can't wait. I took a sip from my water. This type of stuff was all Luke talked about when I came by. He finally seemed to notice my disinterest. I also want hot maids, of course. Really hot, older maids. That love me. You know, I think that you would make a shitty god, Luke. I tell him. And he's actually silent for a truly blissful moment. Well, everything in my bliss is going to cool as hell. Unlike yours, apparently. He sets the broom down. And it's not going to be nearly as boring as it is around here. Seriously. He looks around the empty sandwich shop. Where the hell is everybody? We're right by the beach. They are all dead by suicide or working. I say, and he winces. Hey, why do you use that word? They're just in the bliss, you know. He sounds the words out while he says them. They're dead. You have to die to go there. You kill yourself. Yeah, but, like, saying that makes it sound bad. They're happier on the other side. You know that, right? Luke grimaces. You always seem so down in the dumps. It makes me sad. I don't know, man. Things have sucked recently. Everyone I know wants to die and experience this happy eternity. But isn't it fake? I mean, it's just what their captured soul/mind creates. You need to buy a pill to experience it. It's not the same as having a mansion in the real world. It literally is, though, because to them that is the real world. Actually, it's better, because the real world sucks hot ass. I'd rather have my mansion in the bliss. No taxes, sure, but is lobotomizing yourself and going to a dreamland really that much better than facing the world? Wouldn't it get boring after a while? Ooh, look at the big intellectual over here, with the big words. Who the hell cares? It's real to them. It's going to feel as real to us when we go there. You know, I heard that you can even wipe your own memory at any time. Your life before the bliss, even your life during it if you get too bored. Isn't that rad? I have like so much bad shit that's happened to me. You wouldn't even believe, dude. I know that you have too, Sal, and honestly, I definitely can't wait to forget about this shithole. I let out a long sigh.
I wonder if my mom chose to forget me.
Luke stops sweeping the floor and looks up at me. I have my head in my hands. My face feels warm, and I hate that Luke's looking at me. Was I really that bad of a daughter? She'd prefer to not even remember? I mutter, and he doesn't know what to say to that. Actually, he does. Well, you can make a new mom in the bliss, can't you? I get quiet. Luke regrets saying it. You can see it on his face. I stand up to leave. I'm sorry, Sal. Please wait, is the last thing I hear before I step outside. When I got back to the house, I found my dad home early, sitting at the dinner table with mummified Mom. He muttered something about a terrorist attack at his workplace. It wasn't on the news, but some extremist religious types planted a bomb that killed 4 people, destroyed the whole building. They did it, I guess, to remind everyone that death matters, and that the bliss is a fake afterlife, or whatever. Satan's work or something. When I talked to him, I noticed something else was off. You're not drunk? What's up with you? I ask him, sitting down across the table. Sally, dearest, I've had an idea. Did you turn on the news today? I hadn't. They're reselling a faulty batch of Daedalus pills. It's only at 30% of retail value because there's a chance for the pills not to work. I'm silent. Did you hear me? It's a 70% discount. So you know what I did? What you do, Dad? I was starting to feel sick. He chortles with glee and gets up from the table. I took out a bunch of home insurance policies thinking we'd burn our house down, but it still wasn't enough. He's rummaging in the kitchen, looking for something. Where the hell I put it? Anyway, what I ended up doing is I also took out a life insurance policy on your bitch mother, and one on you too. On me? Yes, my dear. Right, here it is. He opens the fridge and takes out a Molotov cocktail. So, the plan is, he'll burn this place down with you and your bitch mother in it. Then I can take the insurance money to buy a pill. What do you think, Sal? He's so excited, like a kid excited to go into the toy section of a chain store. What? What the hell do you mean? You want to kill me? Dad? Oh, Sally, you're so stupid sometimes. It won't matter, dear. I can just remake you in the bliss. Your mother too. We can be a happy family again on the other side.
But it won't be me.
Not at the dinner table anymore either. I'm trying to creep my way back towards the front door, but he jumps in front of me. It will be you. He'll give it all of your memories and everything. But if you keep pissing me off with that attitude, maybe I'll make you be exactly what I want you to be. I could make whatever changes I want. He's between the door and me. He's bigger than me. I can't believe you're doing this, I say while he digs in his pocket and fumbles for a lighter. The bottle rocks through the air in his hand. I can't believe I didn't try this sooner. It's genius. He takes a step towards me, and I scramble for options. What if it doesn't work? You said the pill can be faulty. Dad stops for a brief moment. Well, to be honest with you, Sally, whether the pill works or not, he grins. You still don't have a job yet. Because of that, part of me just wants to burn you alive anyway. You really need to learn to grow up and handle these things. I love you, but it's part of life, Sally. I make a dive for the door, and when he lunges, I feign at the last second. Now's my chance. I slip past him, and I make it to the door. I throw it open, and make it almost 3 steps outside before I'm dragged, shouting, back inside. The neighbors will not help me. When he throws me to the floor, there's a big chunk of my hair still caught in his fingers. How fucking dare you? I'm literally trying to send you to heaven, and you can't just be an adult about this. You want to run out on me? Like your mother? He lights the cocktail, flames licking his face. I can't breathe. How did things get so bad so fast? You know what? Maybe I won't let you into my bliss at all. Maybe I'll just kill you. Maybe. I stagger to my feet, and he raises the cocktail high above his head. Maybe I'll kill you again, in the bliss. And again, and again. He chuckles the way that men do. Maybe I'll do something else, and I kick him in the balls. He drops the cocktail, and the room goes up in flames. My dad's on fire now, shouting his head off. Wax sculpture in a microwave. He's grabbing at me. He's yelling, "Take the pill. Save me. Save me." It's only when I claw my way out his grasp and sprint into the street do I realize that I'm on fire. I make it maybe 5 staggered steps before crashing into the asphalt. While my skin melts, my mind goes back to that homeless guy wearing swim trunks. It takes me only a few more seconds of pure agony before I pass out. Yeah, you're probably going to be in pain for the rest of your life. If I were you, I'd just give up, honestly. The nurse told me that after I woke up in the specialized care unit, most of my upper body had sustained the burns. But that's not the part that hurt. My nerve endings up there had been burned away. It was everything else that hurt. You know, 'cause we're both Libras, I decided to look into you a bit. Not heading to any college, almost 18, homeless after the fire, and no work experience. Seriously, your future's screwed, especially after the hospital bills you. I physically can't answer her. The feeding tube won't let me. The first month was hell. Especially after I regained sensation in my hands, and the nurse saw me moving my fingers. Your injuries are healing, so what's your problem? The nurse would ask me. Why aren't you looking for work opportunities? You have a phone. Are you just a masochist? Are you looking for sympathy? The food was horrible too. This liquid gruel that's made from recycled organic material. It's the same stuff they feed to prison inmates. I wish they at least added some flavoring, or did a better job liquefying it. I keep getting fingernails stuck in my teeth, but my body healed more and more over time. The day they took the feeding tube out was a good day. One morning I woke up to the shrill voice of a woman in my hospital room. Jesus Christ. Oh, pardon me for taking the Lord's name in vain. It's the smiling shark, one of the people who helped to fund the Daedalus pill, the one with the permanent plastic smile. She's flanked by 2 suited men wearing sunglasses. Sorry about that. It's just that you're pretty fucking hideous. The hospital gown is pretty basic too. Like gosh, where's the effort? The woman strokes her blonde curls. They don't move the way that hair's supposed to move. You had hair in the picture too. The hair really was your best feature. What a shame. Can I help you? I ask her, and she cackles. Why? Yes, you can. You see, kiddo, I'm in a bit of hot water with my PR team right now, and they're making me do this lottery thing. Lottery thing? Yeah, it's such a hassle. I just wish they would take my feelings into account sometimes, you know. All I did was approve the sale of a few faulty batches, and now I have to give out a free Daedalus pill to some human waste of federal resources. It fucking sucks. I mean, who cares that some poor suckers died without getting to the bliss? It's probably what God wanted for them. She waits for me to agree with her, but I stay quiet. Oh right, the lottery thing. Whatever. Well anyway, you won. You get a free trip to the bliss. Lucky you. One of the suited men hands me a packet. There's a single red pill inside of it. A camera flash blinds my eyes as the other one takes a picture of the shark and me posing together. It's all very quick, like I'm being robbed. Alright boys, get me the fuck out of here. It smells like a boiled rat in this building, and not in a good way. And then the shark's out the door. Just like that. One of the suits follows her, but the other stays at my bedside. Would you like a complimentary death with that pill, miss? The man says, taking out a pocket knife. He's grinning. I promise I can do it the way you want me to. Fast or slow? I promise. No, I can do it myself. Thank you so much for the opportunity. The man falls silent, grumbles something, hands me the knife and leaves. I sat in that hospital with that pill for a good long while. I sat and felt the saliva sit in my mouth. I could feel my bandages clinging to my body, the thin pieces of fabric the only thing keeping it from sloughing off. They're happier on the other side. You know that, right? I remember Luke telling me, a perfect paradise, where you can forget. Ignorance is bliss, right? I put the pill in my mouth. It's melting on my tongue now. I promise myself, I'll swallow it in 1, 2, 3. And I spit it out. When I got discharged a month later, I didn't really know where to go. The sandwich shop looked the same when I got there, but something felt off the moment I stepped inside. The bell rang, but Luke wasn't there sweeping the floor. He wasn't behind the counter either. It was just a single old man, Luke's manager. "Where's Luke? Didn't you hear?" He barely looks up from the counter. Luke was right. He did smell like radishes. Hear what? The idiot bought one of those reject pills at a reduced price. He tried to pass on to the bliss, but it didn't work. Now he's just dead, and I have to do his dumbass job. There are no words for me to say. There is nothing I can say. Seconds pass like eons. What's wrong with you? Oh, you must be that girl he kept going on about. Yeah, he was really upset because of you. Thanks for that, by the way. He told me to give you this note he wrote. The old man says, handing me a note. "Now get out of my store, you dirty transient. This job is mine. You're not even pretty, so no loitering inside. The sun's high in the sky, and I'm sitting on a street curb. You haven't come back in a while. Sorry I messed things up here. I'm a jerk. I'll make you happy on the other side. I promise. See you soon. Luke." The note read. The knife that the suit gave me is still in my pocket. I take it out and flick the blade open. People are yelling. I realize it's this old couple, both of them wrinkled and ugly and fuming, screaming and cursing at each other at the top of their lungs, the way you only can at people you've known since forever. You can hear them all up and down the street. They're so loud, the few other people around try to ignore them. Not that the couple cares. Something else catches my attention. A girl riding by on a bicycle. She's maybe middle school age, and there's an adorable cat in the front basket. Both of them stare ahead unflinchingly, like they're deaf or something. Stupid day. I turn the knife over in my hands, letting it snip at my fingers, creating skin tags on the tips. If I still had that pill, I definitely wouldn't take it. A deal at sunrise, for who we are is given unto us at birth. For when we are born unto this world, to when and where one does not know. But what if one was to become another? Not to awaken into their life, but to awaken into the life that you know, to the life that you already live, to awaken into your life, living your life as if you was born another person, a person that you ask to be.
But at a high cost, the price your soul.
But there would still remain many more questions, unanswered questions, for who among us could even answer them? For something like this would be priceless. There is no monetary value that could even be placed on this, but the questions would remain. For some would even be mystified by it if they were to find out, while other would ensure that your days were numbered, if any, while many would question God as to why, with many not turning to salvation, but by showing their disdain towards God for this. They would question God, where was you for many other things? They would question as to why would you allow someone to awaken into an entirely new body? Well, yet so many are born the way they are. For questions many would have, but answers to no one could answer. For yet it would be better if one was to disappear into a society with no one ever knowing. Even with today's technology, would anyone even notice? Notice if you were someone else? Finding myself standing there on the street corner away from the light. That shine from the street, right across the street from me. Shining its light, near me, but not enough to reveal me. But just enough for me to see, but not to reveal me. Not just yet, but knowing that the light from the morning sunrise would reveal all. But for now, with me standing there looking down a half-lit street with no one coming or going for the time being, for it was still very early in the morning, with all of the late-night party-goers passed out or asleep. Occasionally seeing someone walking into the quick stop, wondering to myself, how would people even handle something like this? If they knew, would they just keep walking on, not really noticing? Or if they stopped to talk for a bit, would they even notice? Or could someone even look like a famous person and still go about daily life unnoticed? I guess I would find out when the sun comes out. Other than that, it was just me out here alone with only my thoughts. Standing there waiting for the first firm sunlight to hit, leaving me plenty of time to think. Wondering to myself why I did it. Why did I write what I wrote, not knowing at the time or understanding how it would forever change my life as I knew and lived it, whether it would be for the better or for the worse. I would soon find out, but for now I guess it will just be me living my life day by day, knowing that this was what I asked for, not really thinking about what the consequences would be at the time, only thinking to myself that I would cross that bridge when I came to it, standing there waiting for the sun to rise, bringing with it a day of not knowing, A day of when I will find out what the day would reveal for me. Standing there feeling the cool early morning breeze blew up against me, standing there with my hoodie covering over most of my face. But the question I guess would be, where do I begin? From now, or where I was at the moment, or from the very beginning? The beginning of when this all started, starting with a dream that would bring me to where I am now. Thinking back with me being in the 7th grade at the time, sitting there in the car with my friend Josh, wanting to tell him something, wanting to tell him about a dream. You know, one of those kind of dreams that you just couldn't wait to tell someone. Yes, that kind of dream. But not just any dream, a dream that would lead me down a path that would forever be my destiny. But not yet. First, let's begin from the middle. So, let us go back to the first. Not the first dream, but let's start from the visit. A visit that I would never forget. A visit that would end with me being where I was now. My name is Dakota Hayden. Finding myself standing there inside of the psychiatrist's office, looking into a mirror, looking at a guy standing there at around 6'1", with brown kinda curly hair and green eyes, standing there waiting for the doc to come. Oh, the good doctor, wondering what will I tell you today? What can you be able to tell me? Will I find answers? Or will I be left knowing even less than before, even coming here? But for now, where is the good old doc at? Roaming around, kinda stirring up the other patients while doing so, with the receptionist finally putting her finger up to her lips to me, saying to me, "Hush, be patient, he will be with you shortly." Walking around the office glancing at different objects, some of which seemed very old or very odd, depending on how you would look at them, I guess. Some of them with a kinda demonic look to them, others just well seemed ancient. The kind of ancient that the teacher was either going to slap your hand or bust your ass if you touched, or in this case, the receptionist, as she just sat there giving me the old evil eye. I could see her dead staring at me, just daring me to touch it. She may have looked like a skinny 25 pounds soaking wet, but the look she was giving me said otherwise. Don't touch. Just then, as the good old doc would walk into the waiting room, walking over to greet me first by shaking my hand, standing there looking at me, looking at his long black hair and eyes to match. Even his glasses that he wore made him stand out from the crowd. You knew that he was there with his presence, and with a calm, cool voice, saying to me, but at first in my head, "A deal you want, huh? A deal you will get. But not tonight. But at first light, you will see what you ask for." Now with him dead staring me straight into my eyes, knowing that he already knew, but a question followed. "So, you are Dakota, I presume. So what can I do for you? Or better yet, what can you tell me? But first please sit down and tell me what it is that you want to tell me." Just as I looked over, seeing a girl saying to me, "Oh, tell him everything, tell him what you wrote," leaving me puzzled and complexed, wondering, how do you even know what I wrote? Giving me a smirking smile as she then pointed her finger into the air, waving it back and forth. "Shame, shame, everybody knows your name." But leaving the girl to be as I made my way into his office, sitting there looking over at the doc, sitting there looking back at me, looking at me with his calm demeanor, smiling at me. I then said to him, "Where to begin?" First thing is, I was just going about my business, just finishing up before I went home for the night. And that was when it happened, with the doc sitting there eyeing me as I said her, asking me when what happened, looking back at him with his straightforward looking eyes, looking right back at me, never blinking, as if he was looking straight into my soul. Just as I said, she happened. I was just about to turn a corner then. She appeared. A girl from my dreams, sitting there, leaning back into his chair. The doc would look at me with his just so glaring eyes, glaring straight at me, as he said to me, "So, what is it about this girl? Have you seen her somewhere before? Maybe you ran into her before." As I sat there looking at the doc glaring right back at me, wanting to tell him everything. But how? How would one explain this? As the doc sat there looking at me, giving me a smile like he knew something but didn't want to say it. Just like a schoolgirl saying, "I know what you did," as we sat there looking at each other dead into each other's eyes. Before I just spoke up saying, "I can't really explain it." She just appeared right from around the corner, with Doc giving a look, with a dead-ass stare for a moment before saying to me, "Yes, isn't that quite remarkable? A girl just appears out from of nowhere walking around a corner. I guess girls just don't normally walk around corners. With me still trying to find a way to explain this, as I said to the doc, it's not like that. It wasn't just any girl, doc. She was a girl straight out of my dreams. The kind of girl that you only dream about. Long blonde hair, deep blue eyes that just can't be matched, that keep sucking your soul straight in, knowing that you want it, knowing that you asked for it. I know that it all seems kinda crazy, doc, but it was real. She was real. I could see the doc sitting there chewing on his thoughts, sitting there with his judging eyes, judging me, knowing that I was guilty as hell, giving me a smile before saying,
So tell me more about this girl.
did you see her beforehand somewhere? Maybe you just ran into her somewhere and your memory just kicked in. It was now like a staring contest, sitting there waiting for the other to flinch, as I just looked at him, with his long staring demeanor looking at me as if he was daring me to flinch, like two kids on the playground darling each other. You first. No, you first. Chicken are you? Just as I saw her standing in the corner laughing at me saying, just tell him already, throwing my hands overhead saying, what the fuck? Am I crazy or something? Standing up as I stood there looking over at the doc, looking at him leaning back into his chair giving me a look of daring me to tell him, with the same girl saying to me, come on, you can do it. Tell him. To tell him everything. To spill it all out, and with a louder tone saying to him, what do you want me to say? I am fucking trying to tell you the best way that I can. What do you want me to tell you? All I know is I would see her in all of my dreams. I would even see her when I wasn't even dreaming. At some point in time, it was she knew where to be, like I was meant to be there as well, as Dakota stood there looking dead-eye at the doc, before yelling, before calming down. Look, I mean, on a couple of occasions I would.
See her at different times, but on one occasion I looked up only to see her like she was saying to me, I know what you did.
Smiling to me, waving her finger at me, saying, shame, shame, I know your name. And that I was guilty as hell for writing what I wrote. So tell him already, or are you too scared to? Just Dakota look around the office, seeing her popping her head around a corner, waving at him with a smile. Hiya. With Dakota throwing his hands up into the air, walking around the office, looking to and from the doc, as he sat there still leaning back into his chair, sitting there like a little Ghibli boy, like he was fucking drawing my life, or something, looking at me like he was wanting more, seeing him sitting there at his desk, yelling at me saying, I want more? Give me more. Just then, seeing two girls appearing right behind Doc, with all three of them walking towards me, as Doc was yelling as he was motioning with his hands, yelling, give me more, give me more, I want more, tell me more. What? What do you want me to tell you? Please tell me what it was that you want to know. Why don't you tell me why I am having these dreams, Doc? Fucking tell me. Watching me as I walked around his office as the staring contest continued, looking back and forth to each other, like we were at the OK Corral, waiting for the other to draw first. As the doc stood there motionless looking at Dakota with a dead stare, a look that was looking straight into Dakota's soul, before saying, you know what you want to say, I know what you want to tell me, but all you have to do is say it. Just as the doc then smiled to me before saying, so, how times have you dreamed of this girl? How many times have you seen her? Are the dreams consistent, or do they just happen sporadically? It was now a full stare down. Doc looking at me. I was looking at him, and no one wanted to flinch. I was like I could hear Doc's thoughts sitting there, looking at me with his judgmental eyes. But I didn't want to flinch. It was now like I was daring him to. But like two little kids on the playground not wanting to give, imagining two boys on the playground yelling at each other saying, it's mine and you can't have it. No, it is mine and not yours. So I did by saying, I mean, you don't fucking understand. It was as if she was inviting me, looking at the good doc as he just gave me a smile, sitting there grinning from ear to ear, like he was the bigger kid, knowing that he was the alpha male, the winner, the first to make, seeing him jumping onto his desk, pounding his chest, saying to me in own way that he was the real man there, as Dakota then grabbed his head with his hand saying, I'm fucking crazy, I know it, as he then turned to the doc with each of them now staring at each other, not wanting to flinch. It was now, are we going to do this, looking at each other, wanting the other to give, Wanting to be the playground bully? Then just out of the blue, the doc said,
Tell me, Dakota. Tell me about the first one. The first dream. Tell me what you did to bring this on. To bring her into your life.
as he sat there staring at me with a death stare, giving me a smile, as I then said to him, "No." As the doc just stared at me with his gleaming eyes, I could see him chewing away at his thoughts, knowing that he knew what was going to happen to me once it happens, knowing in a way that he knew what I wanted to say. Just as he then looked at his watch before saying to me, "Well, Dakota, looks like our time is up. I got other clients that I need to see." As he then got up from his chair, walking over to me, putting his arm around me, saying with a grin, saying, "You don't have to tell me everything. I already know." Looking at Dakota with a devilish grin before saying, "But I will see you later. You can be sure of that." As the doc then walked out of his office, Justus looked to a picture hanging on the wall behind his desk. A picture that I didn't notice before, and that was a picture of what looked to be hell. Looking down to his desk, I then saw the binding contract that I had written, selling my soul to be her. With the look of him leaving now, I walking out of his office to where I found myself now, standing there with my hoodie still covering my head, standing there waiting for the first morning sunrise. As I thought back on the first dream, thinking back to sitting there with my friend Josh, telling him about the dream, just as the first morning's light was just beginning to make its way into a new day, as I stood there thinking about the first dream, seeing her for the first time in a dream, showing her a blonde-haired girl holding a skateboard. But as the thought had left my mind, the sun's light was now at full face. As I then began to walk down the street, slowly sliding the hoodie from over my head, revealing long blonde hair, looking over into a glass window, looking at a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl staring back at me. For as I continued walking down the street, the person that was me was now gone. And with that, I just vanished into the crowd forever, as with the world never knowing. My dad was a wheelman for the mob. The Mariani family has lived in this country for generations. We were a loud and proud bunch from the boot. Everyone always stereotypes Italian immigrants as brutish thugs, or that we are all connected. Unfortunately, my family liked to live up to those stereotypes. From the moment we stepped off the boat, it seemed like we were fine-tuned to trouble. My great-grandfather got his start as a bootlegger, right on the tail end of Prohibition. Vincenzo the Wall, Mariani, my grandfather, a respected capo in one of the 5 families, which leads us to my father, Frank Sr., who never really had the temperament or fortitude for the life. A fact that Papa Vincenzo respected, all things considered. Still, it was different back then. He was expected to keep up appearances, make like he was grooming an heir. So, he and Dad came to an understanding. Dad would make small collections, drive some friends around on errands. It would all work out, as long as he didn't ask any questions. Dad wasn't stunned. He had some inkling about what was happening on those drives. This went on for a few years, and ended somewhat abruptly. My father moved away and distanced himself from that part of the family. We rarely saw the black sheep, Mariani, unless it was for a wedding or a funeral. The last time I saw Papa Vincenzo was a few weeks ago at my cousin Vincent's funeral. Actually, he went around the room shaking hands and offering condolences, gabbing with anyone who would indulge him. He and Dad said few words to each other, and it was then I decided I needed to get the full story of their fallout. That night I cornered him in the kitchen, asking him why he was so cold to his own father. I laid on the guilt heavy on him, but he scoffed at that. "When I was your age, if I talked to my father like that, they would have found me in 7 different dumpsters," he exclaimed. That probably wasn't too far off from the truth. I urged him on, and he got quiet, dwelling on the past. Finally, he spoke up. "Frank, did I ever tell you about some of the jobs I did for my old man?" There was a grave tone to his voice. He went on to tell me about a few stories from his time in North Jersey. They fascinated me. Some of it sounded so outlandish. He told me about the first time he went on a collection run. He didn't have his own set of wheels yet, and Papa Vincenzo loved his son very much, but not so much as to let him drive his 1958 Cadillac. He ended up showing up at the brownstone of Paulie Caruso, hat in hand, meekly asking he could use his car for the gig. Well, Paulie was beside himself, smacking him across the head as he threw Dad his keys. Paulie drove a ragged brown Aspen, a permanent dent in the hood from some drunken brawl down at Cindy's. They got in and Paulie pointed down the road and they set off on his first collection run. Now for this first one, Dad reiterated. He didn't leave the car. They traveled all around town, sometimes circling stores 3 or 4 times before Paulie had him slam on the brakes. He would calmly get out of the car and enter whatever bar or bakery they had parked themselves in front of. Dad would hear the ringing of a bell and some store owner loudly welcoming in Paulie, who took in this wealth and good cheer with glee. It would often be a few minutes before he would come back out, tucking something into his pocket. He was all smiles with the owner when he would leave, sharing a laugh or a pat on the back with them. But the moment he sat his eyes back on the Aspen, his expression would stone over, those beady eyes of his long since losing their soul. Only once that day did a collection take long. It was their second to last stop of the day, a bait and tackle shop that had just opened up. Paulie's face darkened more than usual as they pulled up, and he saw the owner twiddling his thumbs at the register. He pointed at him with such force. It was like he expected the owner to vaporize with a glare. This gentleman, Paulie explained, is always short. Paulie slammed the car door shut in a huff and made his way inside. Now Paulie was not a very tall man. He was about 5,004 bit of a beer gut and had the face of a century-old bulldog. He also had the temper of one as well. Dad could see the shop owner's face explode in terror as Paulie strode over to him. As he shot that shark-tooth grin at the man, he couldn't hear what they were saying. Paulie was simply nodding as the man spun some yarn, gesturing to his register and the empty store around him. Paulie seemed understanding and took the man by the shoulder and led him to the back. It was then my father noticed Paulie had spun the closed sign around when he had entered. It was about half an hour before Paulie emerged, like a ghoul hiding in the shadows. He came out of an alleyway, glancing up and down the street in a paranoid fashion, before waltzing back into the Aspen, huffing and puffing. Dad noticed Paulie's knuckles were throbbing and raw but said nothing. Nice enough guy. Shame his business ain't taking off like he thought it would, Paulie said, cutting into the tension in the air like a butcher swinging his cleaver. Didn't see him come out of the back, Dad mumbled. Paulie gave him the side eye. I was helping him do some inventory in the back. He took a bad fall. Told him to take a day, ice his leg a little. Paulie remarked casually, "You're a helpful guy. You know that right, Frankie?" Paulie asked him, a deadpan look on his face. My dad sputtered and tried to reply, but Paulie laughed, jabbing him in the gut playfully. Hee, you're a good kid. Pull up to that butcher shop round the corner. I'll buy you a hero. And that was end of that. He never brought up the tackle shop after that. That shop would end up going under a few months later. Some of Paulie's associates had come in and ransacked the place, taking everything but the copper wiring. He never heard about what happened to the owner, but he could imagine and left it at that. Dad did well as a driver, having a few regulars who requested him specifically. They tipped big and treated him well, if for no other reason than he was the boss son. Eventually father was able to afford his own set of wheels. Red gaudy looking Vega. That car was Dad's pride and joy, and had very strict rules about it that he enforced on the wise guys. One of these rules was no carpets. Before I could even ask, Dad explained the origin of that rule. One night he got a call from Paulie, a friendly but strained tone in his voice. He knew it was late, but he needed him to come pick him and his buddy up from some club in Newark. Dad knew by now not to argue, so he hopped in his car and headed to some sleazy nightclub. He went around back and saw Paulie standing there with his buddy, Sal Valentine. Sal had the nickname Waddles, due to a case of gout he had that got so bad he ended up having half his left foot amputated. Paulie saw my dad pull up and reached for something behind his back, relaxing only when he saw who it was. Sal waddled up to the passenger side and got right in, reeking of cheap booze and cheaper women. Hey Frankie boy, how's your rash? He joked. You look good, you've been hitting the gym. Important thing for a kid your age. Gotta stay in shape for the ladies, huh? He had a crazed look in his lazy eyes, but Dad met his gaze and held it. Though out of the corner of his eye, he noticed Paulie lugging something behind the Vega and popping the trunk. I tell you Frank, you got it easy being young. Whole life ahead of you. Some people don't know what they got till they lose it. You know, haha. Sal was rambling now, and Paulie overheard him, slamming the trunk and heading to the back seat, snapping his fingers. He flashed sad a smile as he came in. Hey Frank, sorry to disturb your beauty sleep there, but, well, Waddles over here had a bit too much and lost his keys. Sal smiled sheepishly, grinding his teeth at the mention of his hated name. No problem, man. You guys heading home? Dad offered, Well, we need to make a quick stop first down by the docks. Down by the docks, huh? Dad grumbled as started the engine.
Yeah, left some paperwork back there.
Sal countered. Paulie shot him a look, and he snapped shut real quick. The drive over to the docks was unusually quiet. It was about 1 a.m., the roads devoid of travelers, and the cops had pretty much packed it in for the night. The radio droned on, playing some quiet melody that Dad couldn't quite place. He was so focused on that he didn't hear the light thumping coming from the back. Paulie heard it before him, and from the rear view he could see all color drain from his face. He heard a louder thump now. More deliberate. Dad raised his eyebrows. Besides him, Sal glanced out the window, ignoring the elephant in the trunk. "What was that noise?" he said, watching Paulie in the rear view. He shrugged the question off. "You see the game last night? O'Brien took a fucking header, huh?" he said, all chummy. More thumping as Sal shifted next to him. "A lot of potholes on the road. Frankie, gotta watch out, you'll ruin your suspension," he spoke. Paulie looked like he wanted to strangle him. Against his better judgment, Dad pulled off to the side of the road. He could see Dock 55 in the distance. Massive overhead cranes marking the promised land. The thumping became frantic now, panicked even. Paulie threw up his hands as Sal got out of the car. "What the fuck is back there?" Dad asked plainly. "Nothing, old carpet, don't worry about it." Paulie mumbled as Sal popped the trunk. A muffled voice cried out from the back as Sal began shushing insistently. "Pretty chatty for a carpet," Dad remarked. There was a smacking sound from the back as the carpet began to cry out, a little less muffled now. "Waddles, you limp-wristed fuck you. Let me out of here, right now, or you'll..." Waddles silenced the carpet with a solid left hook and gave him 3 more for good measure. The trunk slammed shut behind him, and Sal came back, wincing as he held his hand. Dad clucked his tongue and turned the radio off, facing Paulie. Paulie held the facade of a mean bastard, but his eyes sang a tragic tale of embarrassment and guilt, a rarity for a man like him. "Does my father know you have Antino Petriello in a carpet?" he asked him, not a hint of fear in his voice as he stared down Paulie. "It would be prudent if you didn't," Paulie finally admitted. My father simply nodded and pulled back onto the road. The docks were deserted. By design, of course, no one was dumb enough to loiter around Dock 55 after hours. It was an open secret that 55 was where Mariani family problems went to disappear. No questions asked. You just secured your luggage in a container marked with a red X, and in the morning a cleaner came in and ferried them out to sea. Dad sat in the car as Paulie and Sal loaded up the carpet, never to be seen or spoken of again. Paulie pulled him aside after the fact, apologizing profusely as he promised he wouldn't pull that stunt again. Paulie produced a wad of hundreds out of thin air, successfully bribing my father to not utter a word of this to Vincenzo. Sal didn't say anything after the fact, though he did give the warehouse one smug look as he limped over back to the Vega. None of this would matter in the long run to my father, though a few days later he did find a few specks of blood in his trunk, and he spread the word to Paul. No carpets. Dad went on to say that he never saw that much of Waddles afterwards, and never did get a clear picture of what went on that night. He and Paulie drifted apart, and a few weeks after the carpet incident, Sal up and vanished. He was never spoken of again, save for the occasional crass joke in his honor. The leading theory Dad had was Waddles was given up as a sacrificial lamb to appease the Petriello crew, who never did shut up about the missing Antiono. Such was life back then. You could lose yours casually at the drop of a hat. This was the par for the course things he dealt with. But in a hushed voice he explained things got weird at times. One time he was picking up 2 guys from a heist. Now I say heist like that, because really it was 2 schmucks who got the bright idea to hold up a truck bound for the Natural History Museum. They figured they would stop it outside of town, stuff the Vega with loot, and drive off into the sunset. It was a late Friday afternoon. The 2 schmucks sulked in the back of the Vega, stockings masking their adrenaline-spiked panic of what they were about to do. My father was bored with it. Wasn't his first heist, and really, he was just doing a favor for one of his regulars, schmuck number 1 in the red tracksuit being the son of his regular. The truck came over the horizon, and Dad jerked the Vega forward, cutting it off. The schmucks jumped out of the car, guns drawn, and at the ready. He watched as schmuck number 2 held up the driver, a black bearded man who was more pot than belly, while schmuck 1 went behind it. It was taking a good while for him to come around the bend with the goods. and Dad was forced to hike up his own ski mask and investigate. He came around back and saw John the schmuck standing there confused as all hell, crowbar in one hand and an empty sack in the other. It turns out the two criminal masterminds failed to vet what would actually be on the truck. They heard history and thought old paintings and fabled jewels. The truck was filled to the brim with ancient Egyptian artifacts and larger-than-life stone statues of animals and pharaohs past. John was standing in front of an open shipping crate, the gold-plated death mask of an old king staring up at him with painted eyes. Dad told him to grab something and let's go. John reached into the crate and filled it with something. The ill-fated heisters made their getaway in the Vega, speeding off into the distance towards safe harbor. John sat in the back, rummaging through the sack. He had grabbed some animal-headed pots and a statue of Bestet. No one in their circle really had any clue how to move. My dad's regular was embarrassed, and the idiots laid low as they sat on their stolen goods. The rest of this my dad overheard through various sources and hushed conversations. John the schmuck kept the Bestet statue, hung it over his mantle. That day forward, every night a cat would creep up to his window and stare at him. He began having vivid nightmares of the dead rising from the grave, wrapping him in gauze and dragging him to hell to face judgment. John became jumpy and flaky, staying cooped up in his room rather than risk his bizarre dreams becoming reality. He would see Black Cat, eyes yellow and hungry, gaze upon him from his bedroom window. He chased it off at first, but it just kept coming back. His father had enough of his foolishness and ordered some guys up to his apartment to drag him out of the house and get some air. When they arrived, they reportedly heard screaming and burst into his place, only to find the window open and a splash of blood near it. At first they thought he had finally lost it and jumped up or slit his wrists or something. They went to the window and looked down to the alleyway, seeing nothing but a black cat licking its paw. The stolen statue was gone from the mantle, and much like John the schmuck was never seen again. I begged my father to tell me more, but he said that was enough for one night. He told me to catch him when he was in a better mood. Well, I just got back from the store with a bottle of his favorite grappa, so hopefully I can coax that better mood out of him and come back with more tales. I visited the Goose Princess at her castle. I ran out of the bank, desperate to get my rent paid on time. I only had 20 minutes left, nothing to worry about with my aggressive driving. But as I looked up from my phone to spot my car, something hard smacked the back of my head. I keeled over, waiting to see if it would strike again.
Hey, what the?
I stood up just in time to see a goose squawking loudly as it wildly flapped away. But the goose was not alone. It had an accomplice. I felt an aggressive tapping on the side of my leg. Something was trying to get into my pocket. What was happening? Wait, it has my wallet. I screamed. I tried to chase the feng goose, but it flapped away like the first, with my wallet clutched tightly in its beak. I ran back into the bank to Sharon, the teller who had handed me my cash.
Sharon, you'll never believe what happened. I started. The goose just stole my wallet. You have to help me. That was the $800 I needed to pay rent. Is there some kind of insurance policy? Anything you can do to help? That was the last of my money.
I'm so sorry, Jay, but you signed the paperwork. Once you walk out of the bank, there is nothing we can do. I'm just so confused, I responded. Those two geese acted together. Sharon rolled her eyes. Jay, didn't anyone tell you about the geese around here? They aren't like normal geese. Why would they be any different from any other geese? I asked. Clearly you are new to town. I'm not the one to tell you the full story, but if you're going to live in Pineville, try to keep a watchful eye to the sky. The geese are watching you. I became even more bewildered. What do you mean? Why would they be watching me? I asked. Again, I'm not the one to explain, but maybe I can interest you in a loan. For I took the loan so I could pay rent, then called my friend Bill.
Hey Bill, you have some explaining to do.
You're the one that convinced me to move to this wretched town. You'll never believe what just happened to me. I was attacked by two geese. They stole my wallet. Wow, Jay, it sounds like you've been goosed. Welcome to Pineville. I got goosed? What is that supposed to mean? Exactly as I said. Did you get a close look at them? Were the geese wearing green goggles? Green goggles? Getting goosed? I wasn't looking at their eyes, Bill. It had my wallet. Can you meet me at the bar and please tell me what on earth is happening? Sure. I'm free this evening. If you really want to know, I'll tell you all about the Goose Princess. Let's meet at 6. The Goose Princess? What? Okay, never mind. He'll ask you later. See you at 6. I drove to my landlord, paid my rent plus a late fee, and then made my way to the Blue Sky Bar. Bill was 15 minutes behind. I made sure to finish 2 beers before I dared start the conversation. Okay, Bill. The story of the Goose Princess. This better be good. I can't believe those geese robbed me. All right, here goes. Once upon a time in a faraway city. Once upon a time, I interjected. What is this? A fairy tale? I wasn't lying to you earlier. Those geese actually stole my wallet. I'm not so good at telling stories, Jay. I don't know any better way to start it, so can you please just listen? Okay, once upon a time in a faraway city, there was a beautiful young woman. Nobody knows why, and don't ask her because she won't tell you. But she left everything behind and moved to Pineville. But there's hardly anything to do here, I exclaimed. Like I said, it's better not to question it, said Bill. But once she arrived, she did need to make some money. She quickly found a job as a server, here at this bar in fact. But she never actually worked here for more than a single night. An unruly man entered about 30 minutes into her shift, laughing about something he hit in the parking lot. After a while, she made her way to the bar and talked to the bartender, where she discovered that the man had run over a goose and that he had last seen it limping behind the corner of the building. She listened in shock, then ran outside looking for the injured goose. Apparently the bartender warned her not to leave, that if she left before her shift ended, she would be fired on the spot. She didn't care. She went around the corner of the building and found the goose, which was curled into a ball and lying under a vent that was blowing out hot air. The goose was bleeding. One of its wings looked broken. She reached out and touched the goose, expecting the worst. But to her surprise, it let out a long, sad, whimpering squawk that broke her heart to pieces. She shed a tear, then scooped it up and placed it comfortably in a blanket in the back of her car. The vet said it wouldn't make it, that the cost was too high, that it was only a goose, but she wouldn't have been able to forgive herself if she let that poor goose die. She brought it home instead and spent the entirety of the next day researching what geese eat. Then she scoured the neighborhood for delicious grasses and berries, hoping to nourish the goose back to health. Shockingly, the goose began to recover. She made sure its wing was set properly, and it eventually learned to fly again. The woman and goose became best friends. She named it Wilfred. Potential boyfriends found it strange that she had a goose as a pet, and to be upfront about it, she changed her name on dating apps to the Goose Princess. From that point forward, she stopped using her real name. For many years, she lived a normal life, except for taking Wilfred with her around town. She became curious about the daily routine of geese, and so she designed goggles with a built-in video camera that fit snugly on Wilfred's head. After that, she could see everything that Wilfred did. But that's exactly when tragedy struck. At this point, the Goose Princess had been dating the same guy for a couple years, and she was the happiest she had ever been. But one day, while watching the video camera from Wilfred's perspective, she saw a couple kissing under a tree at the park. Wilfred normally avoided people, but this time it flew up close to them, as if Wilfred knew them. And as Wilfred flew even closer, she realized, to her horror, that her boyfriend was sitting on the bench, kissing a woman that she had never seen before. Devastated that he was cheating on her, she broke up with him immediately. She never wanted to see him again. I don't understand. I didn't do anything wrong, he had pleaded. Don't lie to me, she yelled. I saw it all, thanks to Wilfred. The soft tears that initially streaked down her face didn't compare to the ones that followed, the ones that came after that awful text message. Wilfred, I got him. No-scoped him with my shotgun just a few minutes ago. Going to fry him up on the old charcoal grill. That will teach him to stop spying on me. She didn't want to believe it, but as the hours and days passed and Wilfred still didn't return to her, she had to accept the truth. Her beautiful Wilfred, that spectacular and amazing goose that she had rescued, was gone, dead. All because of that evil man she had once thought she loved. It was that day that her heart truly shattered and turned cold. It was that day that her trust in humanity ended. It was that day that she truly became the Goose Princess. If you think her obsession with geese ended then, you would be very much incorrect. Her obsession only grew. The very next day she sat at the park, watching closely as geese tiptoed around her. She observed their flight patterns, mating habits, and feeding conventions. The goose princess herself stooped close to the ground, crouching and squatting in ways only familiar to wild geese. She returned to that park, day after day, until she became one with the flock, tiptoeing and squawking and honking like the rest, a goose-like grin spreading from cheek to cheek at every passerby. Even then, we should have recognized her for what she was.
Bill, I responded, can you please stop right there? This is absurd.
How does this relate to those geese who robbed me in broad daylight? In getting there, Jay, as I said, the goose princess lost all of her trust in humanity when Wilfred was shot. She wanted to make people suffer for the sadness they had created and for the sadness in her heart. For their sins against humanity and their sins against love, she took that whole flock of geese at the park and trained them. She fitted them all with those spooky green goggles with those little micro cameras. She saw through their eyes, the eyes of the flock. She didn't just see through the flock, she became the flock, and the flock began to do her bidding. She spied on people. She judged their sins, imagined or not. It was easy to train a goose. At least it was for the goose princess. A fat wriggling worm, a ripe reddened berry, or a handful of seeds was all they needed before submitting to her. They would fly where she wanted them to, spy on whoever she wanted them to, and steal whatever she wanted. Even the smallest of transgressions, she reasoned, justified a visit from her flock. As her small fortune of jewelry, wallets, and other trinkets grew, so did her desire to punish as many people as she could. That castle up on the hill, nobody really knows how she acquired it, but the previous owner was admitted to an asylum. Rumor has it that he clawed at his ears until they turned bloody, lest the geese squawk at him in his nightmares. The castle abandoned, the goose princess moved in. Nobody questioned it, too afraid that they would be met with the same fate. Now it's her castle. She sits up there managing her flock of geese. She loves those geese. They are her family, more so than any person could ever be.
That castle is actually real?
The goose princess is there, right now, I asked Bill. He sighed. Yeah, she's there, as she has been for the last 20 years. She still occasionally comes to town, but be very careful if you interact with her. Chances are high that you will get a visit from her flock. I got up. Okay, I've heard enough. I'll go confront her myself. I really need that $800 back, I explained. Don't do it, Jay. That's a horrible idea. But I was already gone, making a beeline for the castle to get my wallet back. There was one property that fit Bill's description. 30 minutes later, I was parked outside of its gated entrance. 4 geese, 2 on each side, seemed to be guarding it like sentries. Get out of here, I yelled at the geese as I banged on the gate. I wasn't really expecting it to budge, and it didn't, but the geese flew away. I climbed over the gate instead and followed a winding path to the castle. The goose princess was already standing outside the main entrance as I arrived, surrounded by her 4 guardian geese. She spoke first. Look who we have here. Welcome home, my silly goose. Hey, I replied. I'm just here looking for my wallet. One of your geese stole it from me, and I was told to look here. Yes, and that is why you are my silly goose, she said. Come inside. I don't want to bother you. I just want my wallet back. You have already bothered us. Come along inside. Please don't make us wait. The goose princess turned around and walked through the main entrance of her castle. The 4 geese split into 2 pairs and stood guarding the doors. It was only then that I realized that all of the geese were in fact wearing green goggles. I stood motionless, on the verge of leaving. But before I could turn back, another group of 4 geese landed behind me. They squawked and hissed loudly, urging me towards the castle. They watched my every move as I entered the large wooden entryway. I walked along a corridor, and then into a large open room. The first thing I noticed was an enormous mosaic goose, taking up the entirety of the large wall furthest from me. It was done with so much precision and detail that it would be considered a masterpiece at any art gallery. Below the mosaic goose was a long table with enough seats for at least a couple dozen people. There were 3 people seated. Are you impressed, my silly goose? She started. It took me 2 years to create that. Wilfred, my first friend of the skies, taken from us in such a horrific manner. Come join us for dinner. I'd like you to meet my good goose and my bad goose. A woman and a man who were seated at the table looked up. Welcome, silly goose, they said in unison. Can everyone please just call me Jay? I'm just looking for my wallet. Then I'll be on my way. All three of them just sat there and laughed at me. "He really is a silly goose," exclaimed the man. "You came all this way to retrieve a wallet, but now you are part of the flock." "I am not part of your flock," I exclaimed. "Not yet," said the Goose Princess with a smirk. "Both of them came here willingly. Good Goose sold his watch collection to pay for some of the repairs around the castle, and Bad Goose, she was on the run after a murder conviction and came here for refuge. But whether willingly or not, everyone who visits me joins the flock. I forgive all of their sins. Only humans can sin, and a goose is not a human. I forgive all of your sins, silly goose." "Great. If I am your silly goose, can I have my wallet back?" "What need does a goose have with a wallet?" she asked. "Come sit." Dinner did look delicious, and I resigned myself to sitting at the table. Dig in. All of this was donated by local restaurants. The geese pick up food for us every evening. The food tasted great, and when we were all done, the Goose Princess stood up on top of the table and uttered a singular loud squawk. The 4 geese standing guard flew away and called out to the rest of the flock, which descended upon the castle. Thousands of them poured in through the entryway, the windows, and from other areas of the castle. "It is quite a coincidence you joined us today, my silly goose. We are having a celebration this evening."
A celebration?
I asked, but she ignored me. Instead, she stood on top of the table and began squawking, honking, and clucking like a goose. It must have meant something, for every single goose in the castle was alert and staring at her with their utmost attention. The closer they crowded in, the more uneasy I became. Some of the geese seemed to talk back, as if asking her questions. She answered them all in that odd goose speak. Even Good Goose and Bad Goose had a few things to say, all completely unintelligible to me. But then the Goose Princess looked at me. "Don't worry, you'll learn how to speak over the next couple months. It is a simple but deeply expressive language. If you could do me a favor now, follow Gregor Zelina upstairs and grab my laptop. It's a bit too heavy for their beaks." A large goose in the back gave a guttural grunt. "What are you waiting for? I need that laptop," she exclaimed, too scared to do anything else. I got up and walked over to Gregor Zelina, who led me upstairs to a room. A laptop was sitting on a table. I grabbed it and returned downstairs. "Thank you, silly goose. Turn it on and cast it to the screen. I have some diagrams to show the flock." I opened the laptop and did as she asked. A large projector screen lowered itself in front of the mosaic picture of Wilfred, and an aerial view of Pineville filled the screen. The Goose Princess spoke a few clucks. The geese erupted with enthusiasm. Good Goose and Bad Goose were on the edge of their seats. "We are going to need your help, silly goose. We need 680 handwritten letters, 1 letter for every household in the city. We are giving everyone a chance to join the flock. We will deliver them all at once at 6:00 p.m. tomorrow, right after everyone gets home from work and is sitting down with their families for dinner. It's the best time to receive the good news. We used the money we found in your wallet to buy paper, envelopes and pens. You will find them in the 3rd room upstairs. Follow Gregor Zelina to your room and get started. Beekson and Mallory will work with you. Make sure to uncover the ink so that they can put a goose print on each letter." "Do I have any say in this at all?" I asked, in my constant state of befuddlement. She just laughed. "No, you really don't. Get to work. You'll need them all done by 5 done tomorrow. That gives you about 19 hours. I sighed and went back to the doorway where 3 geese were waiting. Gregor Zelina led the trio as they marched me back up the stairwell and into a long hallway. I was nudged into the 3rd door on the right and found myself in a surprisingly cozy room. Inside was an ornate desk with large stacks of paper and envelopes. A pack of brand new pens sat on top of the paper. Beekson and Mallory had already started inspecting each item and squeaked at me as they nudged some unopened ink pads. I opened one of the ink pads for them and sat down at the desk. Mallory picked up a piece of paper with his beak and clucked, drawing my attention to it. It was a pre-written letter. I realized that I was supposed to duplicate it word for word. Fortunately, it was a short letter. It read, "The Goose Princess invites you to join her flock. We offer the freedom of the skies and welcome all with open wings. Your human failures and sins will be forgiven. If you refuse, we kindly allow you 1 week to leave Pineville." I got to work. I gave up any hope of getting sleep as the hours dragged on and the geese squawked at me to work harder. As I placed the completed letters in the envelopes, The other geese placed their feet on the ink pad and stamped them. At sunup, I heard a knock at the door. It was Bad Goose. "Good morning," she said. "You are doing well. You have been accepted by the flock." She placed a delicious-looking plate of food on the table. "Don't worry, silly goose. You are safe with us here. She has great plans for us." I shuddered at her words, but accepted my fate. Pretending to be a goose for food and lodging wasn't the worst deal I had ever been offered. But as I finished writing the letters throughout the day, I couldn't help but wonder what her so-called great plans entailed. What did she want with the entire city? That's it for tonight's stories, but the nightmares never end. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a scary experience of your own? Share it in the comments. I just might feature it in a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, some things are scarier than they seem in the dark.